Retention 101, A Practical Guide for Keeping More People by Brian Davis, Church Consultant, Retention Specialist. Chapter 1, Introduction, pages 6 and 7. Every week, churches face this great challenge to be effective at impacting the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. Sounds simple, right? Then why is it such a challenge? Why are so many churches struggling? Why are so many ministers frustrated? First, don't ever forget that there is a spiritual battle waged against every truth-based church and against every Christian every day. We see the physical, but there is also a spiritual battle happening where the enemy wants to stop every church and every Christian from growing. Second, in order to develop a strong and effective church, we need strong and effective systems. Building strong churches takes more than knowing the truth and being able to preach for 45 minutes. There are some components that we have to think through, plan out, and systematically execute week after week if we want to have a strong church. One of those critical components is retention. Since you are reading this book, you are probably like so many other church leaders, wishing you can keep more of the people who try your church. You are probably involved in church leadership to some degree, and you have probably searched the internet and bookstores for information on how to keep more people in your church. That should be the goal of every church. Lots of people are going to heaven, and lots of people are going to hell. And according to Matthew chapter 7, there are more and more going the wrong way every day. But our job as a church is not to sit back and say, "That's just the way it is." Our job is to do everything we can to reach and keep as many people as possible. Our commission is to help as many people get all the way to heaven as possible. Do you have a plan to do that? Do you have a crisp plan to keep as many people in your church as possible? I'm not talking about rearranging your church to please everybody. I'm talking about the fact that we have a responsibility to help people stay in the church, not just get started in the church. Pages 8 and 9. Do you have a clear plan for retention? I ask this question to a lot of churches, and I usually get one of these two answers. 1, yes, but it's not working. 2, no, we don't. For a long time, I just assumed that most churches had a well mapped out retention plan. But over the past few years, I've been shocked that this isn't true at all. They have outreach plans, but not a clear retention plan. And the more I learned, the more I was surprised that churches would spend money, time, and effort on outreach, but hardly any thought on retention. At the very beginning of this book, I want you to let your guard down. I'm not going to try to make you feel bad or feel like a loser. The devil does a good enough job of that himself. If you don't have any retention plan at all, or if you have a plan that's not very effective, I'm going to help you. Take a deep breath, relax, and smile, because by the end of this book, you're going to gain confidence and certainty about the future of your church. My drive. To tell you a little about me, I was raised in church, and like many of you, we went every Sunday. We had a few different pastors and liked them all, but at a certain point, my parents felt like changing churches. The church they felt to go to was about 45 minutes from our house, and they had a Sunday morning service and a Sunday night service. So every Sunday, my sister and I would crawl into the cramped back of our Toyota crew cab truck, and off we went. After the morning service, we either went to the local flea market or took a nap in the back of the church waiting for the night service so we wouldn't have to spend the money on gas going back and forth to our house. My dad felt the call to preach, and after a few years he started pastoring a church. After I graduated from high school, I didn't stay in church. I exposed myself to things I shouldn't have, got involved in things I shouldn't have, did things I shouldn't have, and for a season in my life, I was a mess. However, as I look back on those times, I did learn a lot. You learn lessons in a pig pen that you can't truly understand in a castle. I look back and see how I hurt some people and did wrong things, and while I wish I never would have done those things, I am glad I learned those lessons. I am much stronger because of the reality of those experiences. I'm also thankful for a great wife who never stopped loving me even through tough times. Love you, Lisa. One night, in a very powerful church service, God reached into my life and I reached back, and He radically impacted me. That night, I was changed. As the next few months passed, I went on with life, but things were different. I was praying more, reading the Bible more. I was so interested in the things of God. I had grown up being taught the Bible, so I had a good knowledge of it already, but I had a fresh interest and wanted to know more and more. My wife also had a great experience with God during this same time, which made it much easier for me to live for God. Without boring you with all the details, God blessed us. God called me to be a preacher, and eventually I wandered into pastoring our first church. Wow, how did all this happen in such a short period of time? Lisa, myself, and our 2 young boys were in a position we had never been in. I was trying to lead a church, but there were so many challenges. Lots of people there probably wanted to run us off, and some days we wanted to run off ourselves. We pushed on, and God did some great things. Fast forward, one night, out of the blue, my father and mother called and wanted to come by our house, and when they arrived, they told us what the doctor had told them. My father was diagnosed with prostate cancer. God had led us to leave the church we were pastoring, and I was able to help his church through the time he was going through treatments. Thankfully, with the help of God, he beat cancer and is still cancer-free to this day. Page 10. Troubled. As I look back over that time period of working in both of those churches, I began to be extremely troubled. I noticed that we had reached a lot of people, but unfortunately many of them were now away from the church. They visited and had an experience with God, but where were they now? Why weren't more of them sticking? I couldn't shake it. I was so burdened that I would lay awake night after night thinking about the people who slipped away. And honestly, I felt like a failure. Anytime we can get people into an atmosphere where they can hear truth and experience the power of God, that's a good thing. But what about the rest of their lives? What about helping them make a real life change and experience long-lasting results in their life? As I thought about all those people, I realized that the church had let them down. I had let them down. God was teaching me a very valuable lesson, reminding me that getting people to heaven was the purpose of the church. Like so many other churches, we had been out of balance with too little focus on retaining the people that God had sent to us. We were aggressive about reaching new people, but lacking in our efforts to keep the ones we had already reached. And that sent me on a mission. Not only was I concerned about this, but now it was a driving passion. Why were churches spending so much of their time, money, and efforts on reaching and so little on keeping? Why were so many churches failing in this area? It troubled me so deeply, and not just for myself, but for churches all over the world. I hated the idea that so many church leaders, especially pastors, were spending nights awake and feeling like failures because of this trend. They were reaching some people, but not many of them were staying long term. If you've never been a pastor, it's impossible for me to write out the way it makes you feel. When you pour yourself into something so diligently but fail to see much fruit, it hurts and discourages like you cannot imagine. Page 11. Searching for the answers. I started digging to find out why churches were failing in this area. So many pastors told me that they needed a good revival to stir their church up and get people excited again. And while I don't want to discount the importance of revival services, I knew there was something more to it. I knew of churches that had fantastic church services, but they still weren't growing, so there had to be more to it. I kept searching and started connecting with churches that were doing a great job at keeping people. They were still preaching truth, still living good lives, and their retention rates were high. I picked their brains, eager to find their secrets. I spent hundreds of hours with pastors searching for the keys to success. What was working and what wasn't working? I wanted to go deeper, so I went back to school to become a certified church consultant. I wanted to do anything I could to understand the things that hindered churches in this area and help them get better. I started reaching out to struggling churches, working with pastors, structuring retention plans, developing church software, and preaching and teaching about the critical principles of retention. For the last several years, I've connected with strong churches and strong leaders, and I've been in the trenches working with churches all across America. Those things, along with hours of prayer, have brought me to this very thankful place in my life where God has trusted me with some fantastic insights into how retention really works. Page 12. Why the passion? What a blessing it has been, and it continues to be, because this is what I love. I love being able to help churches in this super challenging area of ministry. I've been asked several times, Brian, why do you do this? Why do you put so much time into this? And there are a couple of reasons that I do. First, I try to live accordingly to the principle of learn and earn to return. In other words, whatever I have the privilege to learn in life, and whatever I have the ambition to earn in life, I need to take every opportunity to return those things to somebody else who can benefit from them. I was talking to my oldest son Avery about this principle, and I used baseball as an example. At the time, he was working on improving his running speed, and more specifically, his ability to take off quickly with bursts of speed. He had been taught by a coach how to make this happen, and he had spent a lot of time in the yard practicing the techniques. Almost immediately, I noticed that his speed had improved a lot. I asked him this question: if you noticed that one of your teammates was struggling with their running, what would you do? His answer was that he would help them. He had learned some things and he had earned some things, but what would he do with those things? God allows us the opportunity to learn things and gain knowledge, and He also gives us the ability to work hard and earn things, but we shouldn't keep our experiences to ourselves. Whenever we take the time to give some of that to others, we're reaching some of the most fulfilling places in our lives. When you educate them with what you've learned and motivate them by what you've earned, you personally take them by the hand and lead them from where they are to a more successful place in life. I personally love doing that. The second reason is because of the joy I feel when I see positive changes. Over the last several years, whether through a church meeting, one of our seminars, a weekend event, or one-on-one coaching, I've seen the light come on for so many church leaders. I have watched churches that had very little hope completely turn around. I've seen pastors who have been stuck in maintenance mode for years start reaching out and winning souls again because now they believe they can keep them. To hear a pastor say, "We can do this," is worth it all. This book is going to give you a plan that will work. Will it take more than snapping your fingers? Sure it will. It will take some work. But what I have found is that people don't mind working a plan if they believe the plan will work for them. This plan will work. Yes, you can implement a system in your church that will help you keep more people than you ever thought possible. That's what this book is all about. There are hundreds of books, articles, and other resources about outreach and evangelism, and we need them all. But we also need to be on a cutting edge of keeping the ones we reach. We need both, reaching and keeping. Page 13. People don't commit. Sadly, it has almost become an expectation of the local church that people will try our church for a while and then they'll be gone. We have seen so many come in and go back out that our minds are programmed to believe this is just the way it is. We start to say things like, "People don't want God," or "People don't want to commit to anything these days." But that's not true. Unfortunately, that's the mindset in so many churches. I've probably never been to your church, so please don't take this personally. But the honest truth is that if people aren't staying at your church, then you need to make some improvements. You may have a fantastic worship team, your musicians may be the best in town, and you may be able to preach conference quality messages. But if people aren't staying at your church, that's a huge problem, and you need to make some improvements. That's what this book is about. It's about retaining people. It's about your church and the fact that God wants you to not only reach people, but to also keep people. It's about getting really honest, asking some hard questions, and identifying some things that need to be changed. It's about having a plan in place that will help people connect with your church and lock them in for a lifetime. Don't worry. I know you've read lots of articles and books that have failed to give you a precise plan. This book is not another book filled with great statements. I'm going to give you step-by-step plan that will make sense and be easy to follow. Pages 14 and 15. Retention. The clearest way to view retention is simple. Your church needs to do its best to keep everybody who has tried your church or is currently attending your church. That's the approach we're taking in this book. If they are a first-time guest, we're going to try to retain them. If they are a second-time guest, we're going to try to retain them. If they are a regular attender, we're going to try to retain them. No matter what stage they are in, we're going to try to retain them. One of the most important reasons that we need to be serious about this is because it's a stewardship issue. There is a principle in the Bible that says if we are faithful over little, God will trust us with more. That's the principle of good stewardship. We hear this a lot when somebody is teaching about money, but this principle applies to more than money. It applies to anything God gives us, especially the souls He sends to us. Retention is a stewardship issue. God is watching to see how we handle the ones He sends to us before He sends any more. God's not stupid. Why would He keep sending sinners to a church that isn't able to connect and keep them? There really is a problem when it comes to retention. According to one study, churches in America are keeping only 1 out of 20 second-time guests. This isn't talking about first-time guests, but second-time guests. We're only keeping 1 out of every 20 of the people who choose to come back a second time. Retention continues to be the place where churches struggle the most. But the good news is that your church can do much better. I want to help you build systems and processes that will give you the best chance to retain every person God sends to your church. Some might argue that there's no perfect formula for this because churches are so different. Different sizes, different cultures, different styles, and so on. And I can understand their point, but I believe there are certain principles that apply to every church and certain processes which should be set up in every church. Even though there be a variety of people, worship styles, and doctrinal beliefs, if a church, any church, will do certain things, the people who visit and try it out will be more apt to return. Return again. Keep returning. Make the best decision of their life. A full-blown decision to sell out for Jesus Christ. And ultimately make it all the way to heaven. That's the goal, right? If our goal is just to get people to our church, we can see a puff of temporary swelling, but we won't see very much true growth. The Bible tells us that he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved. We have to help people get to the end, not just to the church a few times. Surely we all can agree that if a person is going to have a chance of making it to heaven, the best place they could be is in a good church, surrounded by a good church family. Page 16. What is the power of retention? When you think about the systems that every church needs, we know one of them is outreach or evangelism. The ideal of reaching the unchurched has to be one of the top things that we focus on. I hope you are excited about reaching souls. I hope you reach more souls over the next year than ever before. I hope your church doubles in the next 6 months and it explodes with newly saved sinners. But I also hope you keep more of them than you've ever kept and you don't end up back where you started. Let me be clear. We aren't doing people a very big favor when we reach for them, help them make a start for God, then leave them hanging to fight for themselves. If they lose that fight and end up turning back to the world and away from God, the Bible shows us that it's a worse situation for that person than if they had never started. There are some people who say you have to decide whether you want to reach people or keep people. But if any church ever becomes an entity that decides it's going to neglect people for the sake of reaching more, we've lost the original vision. Was it not Jesus Christ himself who had 100 people but noticed that one didn't show up? And he went out to find him and tried to reconnect with him? He didn't want even one to slip away. As church leaders, we have to learn the balance between evangelism and retention. We need to reach as many people as possible, and we need to help as many people as possible. I hope you reach more and more and more. I hope you reach your friends, your co-workers, and every lost person in your family. But more than that, I hope they not only try Jesus and get a small dose of His Spirit, but they actually endure until the very last breath and hear, "Well done." I hope that when this is all over, you end up in heaven and you're able to see a long line of people that not only visit your church once, but stayed in your church and actually made it all the way to heaven. That's the power of retention. Thankfully, your church can see this. No more guessing, no more uncertainty. The things I'm going to tell are not hype, but are proven strategies that have been used in churches of all different styles and sizes to improve their retention, and it can work for you too. I'm not offering you a magic pill. I'm not saying that you will keep every person who visits your church. But I am saying that you can see more people stick, more people stay, and more people grow in God. I can't show you how to grow a church overnight. Growing a church overnight is impossible, but growing a church quicker is very possible. Growing a church better is very possible. That's the approach you should take, that you want to grow your church better and more effective. Pages 17 and 18. The Roller Coaster Ride. I remember talking to a pastor who had been trying so hard to grow his church. He had been there for several years and had seen the roller coaster growth pattern over and over. Maybe you've seen this also. It's when you see new people come and your attendance goes up like a roller coaster climbing the hill. But unfortunately, you know what comes next. The big drop. This pastor had seen that so many times that he had almost stopped believing that it was possible for his church to keep people. Have you ever felt like that? Here's a principle that I believe very strongly. Working smart partnered with working hard is a great recipe for success. He had been working hard, but he hadn't been doing the things that would help him keep more people. The Bible talks about how that there are many different parts of the body, and that all of them are important. As a church leader, you won't be able to be every part of that body. You won't be able to be an expert in every part of your church. That's why it is extremely important for you to surround yourself with people who are gifted, especially in the areas where you struggle. If you struggle with evangelism, find people who are gifted in evangelism and get their input. Read their books. Listen to their advice. If your Sunday services are weak, find people who are gifted in leading worship and planning weekend services. Get their input. Read their blogs and glean from their wisdom. If you are not a hard worker, you never will grow a church anyway. But if you're already working hard and you're not seeing the results you want to see, you have to work smarter. Find people who are sharp in the areas where you are weak in and let them sharpen you. When you attach yourself to people who are gifted, you can not only work hard, but you can work smart also. And that will help you succeed much faster with much less stress. This pastor was working hard, and as we talked, I could tell that there were several things he and his team were doing right. I encouraged him that there were several things that they were doing well, and they needed to keep it up. You are probably in the same category and doing well in several areas. As you read this book, please don't think I am pointing my finger down at you or saying that you haven't been trying your best. Many of you have been involved in ministry much longer than I have, and you could teach me a lot, and I totally respect that. I promise, I don't think I am any better than anybody reading this book. In fact, I want to make it extremely clear that I don't think I have all the answers, and I don't think this plan is the only plan that will work, and I hope I don't come across that way at all. I'm just thankful that God has gifted me in this area, and I want to be able to share some of those things I've learned along the way. God has given me a passion for this area of the church, and I want to give you the things that I've seen to be effective. Pages 19 and 20. Over 30% increase. As I listened to this pastor, I noticed that there were a lot of things they were doing right, but I also quickly identified some things that he needed to stop doing and some things they needed to start doing. One of the things they had to stop right away was asking their guests to stand in their services. You've seen this, maybe experienced it, and as you know, it's one of the most embarrassing things you can ever go through. People don't like to stand in front of a group of people, especially a group of strangers. Also, they didn't have any way to track their attendance. They weren't capitalizing on their second-time guests, and there were a few other things we worked on. They made a few changes, and I worked hard to see things improve. I've worked with a lot of people, but I can honestly say that it never gets old to see their eyes light up. I still look forward to that energy that begins to build when I see them simple ways to make things better and they start believing again. That's right, they start believing again. Even better than that is when they start implementing these simple steps and they actually start seeing more people stay at their church, just like it happened with this pastor. They had been on the roller coaster for years, but over a few months, they were steady and had seen their attendance increase by over 30%. They're still climbing today because they committed to a system that works. Commit. How would you like to retain more people? How would you like to feel confident that your outreach dollars weren't going to be wasted? Retention 101 is about giving you a particular plan, a practical plan, a realistic plan that any church of any size can use effectively. The only one thing that will keep you from being able to use this plan is if the leadership of your church isn't willing to commit to it. That commitment is so important. Not just a commitment to read another book, but to put the plan into action. I've seen lots of churches that have experienced a spark of growth because of an outreach effort, but in just a few weeks, they were discouraged because they didn't sustain any of the growth. That's discouraging. Spending money, time, and resources on a 2-week thrill is not the purpose of the church. Maybe you've experienced something similar, where you've put your time and money into reaching new people, but didn't have a clear system for keeping them. Don't worry. When you finish with this book, you will be able to immediately take action. But you have to do this one thing: commit. You have to decide right now that it's time to take action. You have to decide that you want it to be better than it is, and that you're willing to take action to do the things necessary to see a change. Never lose the burden, and never forget what the real purpose of your church is. I'm not saying that there won't be times where it's the will of God for somebody to leave your church and go to another church. And I'm not saying that you should build your own kingdom and your church is the only church that matters. But you have to believe that lost people must be won. And if they don't stay in a church, they will probably go back out into the same sin and junk they came out of. We have to have the best system possible to keep them, because the church should be the safest place for them to be. If you don't believe in the value of the local church, you probably won't care much about this book. But the value of the local church is huge. Can we win souls on our own? Absolutely. But it's extremely hard for one person to stay committed to God without the influence of a strong church family, without guidance, without a good diet of the Word of God, and without the impact of Christian friends. Page 21. Closing thoughts. What is the real goal of the Christian church? What is the reason Christian churches exist? At the very end of Jesus' life, before he ascended into the sky, he had the opportunity to say a few last words. Jesus chose these words: "Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature." Who? Every creature. If you read the same account in Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 to 20, Jesus told them to teach the people and baptize the people. He said, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. What a shame it would be if we ignore the true meaning of what Jesus said here. Our purpose is not simply to get to try people to try our church. Our purpose is to help people see Jesus, choose Jesus, and live for Jesus their entire life. For a Christian church, growth shouldn't be optional. Remaining the same and never impacting our cities should bother us unless we focus on our plan for retention. We won't see the growth God wants us to see and won't impact our cities the way He wants us to. But it can change. We can see greater results. Let me personalize that for you. Things can change, and you can see greater results. So, if you're ready to take this leap, if you're ready to tweak a few things and make the commitment, there's no reason to wait any longer. Let's get started. Chapter 2. Getting Guests to Heaven. Stages of the Journey. Page 22. One of the greatest downfalls of businesses and churches alike is the lack of clarity. If an organization can't clearly explain their mission, confusion and frustration is the outcome they should expect. Page 23. The Power of Clarity. Clarity is so powerful. If you aren't clear about your mission and strategy, lots of people may be doing lots of things, and you may spend lots of dollars, but you may not be any closer than when you started. People who have a mind to work will work, and if you don't provide a clear mission, they will make up their own. Usually, people aren't trying to overstep their boundaries. They're just trying to make something happen. Lots of times, well-meaning people in churches get labeled as troublemakers because they're trying to make something happen. If the leadership will make it clear to them what the mission is, they would gladly help make that happen. But where there is no clear direction, people will concoct their own. We have to be extremely clear about our approach to retention. We can't simply walk out into a meeting and say, let's try to keep everybody that visits our church. We need precise plans, and we need to have clarity among our team for exactly what we are trying to achieve. A process. When a new visitor comes to your church, they won't be transformed into a perfect church veteran instantaneously. When a person visits your church, it's the beginning of a process that has to happen where they go from a life without God to a life fully committed to God, and God has designed a system where the church has to play a major role in that process. Let's try this. Whenever somebody new visits your church, let's stick a high-caliber pistol to their head and threaten their life if they don't come back the next week. Do you think that will work? We can't force people to live for God. We can't trick people into living for God. They have to choose to live for God. They may choose quickly, or they may choose to hang out and watch things for a while before they make their move. No matter how quickly or slowly they choose to move, they need a church that will continue to help them draw closer to God. It's a process, just like it was with you. The point is that from the time a person is a guest until the time they are in heaven, there are strategies that they go through. If we can't clearly understand these stages and clearly determine what we will do as a church to help them through each of these stages, our retention rates will steadily go up. Page 24. A clear path. Many churches are already touching more people than they realize, but they're lacking a clear marked pathway that will move these first-timers closer to God. Think about the journey a person takes when they make the decision to try a church and about the different stages of that journey. One of the major points of confusion for churches in the area of retention is that we tend to treat everybody the same. But people are at different stages and they need to be handled differently. If we throw everybody into the same category, that's too broad. We need to identify the stages of the journey and develop a system to help people move from one stage to the next. So let's get started, laying out our step-by-step plan. Think about a path with a starting point and ending point and several points in between. Remember, we are creating a plan that will help sinners get to heaven. That's our mission. The start point for our retention system is when a person visits our church. So the beginning of the path is the first-time guest. From that point, we start to see the first-time guest turn into a second-time guest, then into a regular and involved attender, and finally into a complete committed Christian. Here's another way to look at it. Speaking in very practical terms, we need to get them to come, get them to come back, get them to keep coming and get involved, and get them to commit and endure until the end. This diagram shows it even more clearly. View diagram on page 25. There are cases where people are ready to make a leap of faith and commit everything to God in a single night. But most people make decisions slowly, and they have to move through the process. It takes some time for them to try a church, think about things, and make some decisions. You will see it more clearly as you read further, and you will learn the exact actions we can take to help people take these steps. But for now, just understand the plan clearly. We want to help first-time guests become second-time guests. We want to help second-time guests become regular and involved attenders. We want to help regular and involved attenders become completely committed Christians. We want to start with a sinner. Get them to come. Get them to come back. Get them to keep coming and get involved. And get them to fully commit and endure. If we're going to be successful at seeing this happen, there are 3 obvious questions that we need to answer. 1. Can we help a first-time guest come again? 2. Can we help a second-time guest keep coming and get involved? 3. Can we help a regular attender become fully committed and endure until the end? The answers to these questions will determine your success. If you aren't able to help first-time guests return, your church probably won't grow, will it? But what if you can increase your chances of getting first-time guests to come back? Wouldn't that be great? What if you could increase your chances of getting second-time guests to keep coming and get involved in something going on at your church? Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, it's not a pipe dream. It's a reality. You can increase the chances of those things happening. You won't be able to keep every person who tries your church, and that's not what I'm trying to convince you of. What I'm telling you is that with a clear plan and solid strategy, you can drastically increase the number of people who not only try your church, but stay at your church. It all starts with this clear plan. We want them to come. We want them to come back. We want them to keep coming and get involved. And we want them to fully commit and endure. Page 27. Outreach feeds retention. This is not a book about outreach. Some people get confused about this, but outreach and retention are two different components in the church, and they are meant to work together. Your outreach team is going to feed this plan because it starts with a sinner. Your outreach and evangelism efforts are going to reach people, but we can't believe that's all there is to it. Have you ever watched a baseball game where the pitcher was pitching well, but the defense was committing errors? Not long ago, my oldest son had a baseball game, and while the other team wasn't as good as us, they weren't bad. Our pitcher was doing a great job and throwing a lot of strikes, but the defense wasn't backing him up. In the third inning, our outfield made 2 errors, and the other team came back and tied the game by scoring 3 runs. Just as a side note, my son Avery got up in the last inning and ripped the ball into the left field that bounced once and then over the fence for a ground rule double, which set his team up to score 2 runs and win the game. Proud dad. But back in the third, when the defense allowed the other team to score 3 runs, one of the things I said to the infielders when they came into the dugout was, "Guys, you're working your pitcher way too hard. He's throwing strikes, but you guys have to make the plays." Our outreach team is going to reach people and get them into the doors, but we can't blow it. We can't act like there will be plenty more chances. We need a plan to keep them. The outreach system of our church is designed to get people there, but the retention system has to be designed to keep as many of them as possible. Page 28. Closing thoughts. The first thing you and your team need to do is to get clear about the process. Don't put everybody in the same category. People are at different stages and they need to be treated differently. What is our goal for the first-time guests? What is the goal for second-time guests? Here it is one more time. We want to help first-time guests become second-time guests. We want to help second-time guests become regular and involved attenders. We want to help regular and involved attenders become completely committed Christians. Go back through this chapter over and over until you clearly understand it because it's vital to your success. Study the illustration over and over until it burns into your memory. We're trying to get people from guests to heaven. When you and your team get extremely clear about the path, the work is going to go a lot more smoothly. You can't hit the bullseye until you see it. Clarity is power. Chapter 3. Creating Connections. Page 30. Her story was very similar to so many others. She had tried several churches over the years and liked some of them, but just didn't have time to commit. But over the past year and a half, it was different. She had visited an average-sized church in a rural town and had been faithful to it ever since the first day she went. This is the kind of story I love to hear, and this is the kind of story we all need to learn from. Since I've been on this journey to understand retention, I have interviewed so many church leaders and picked their brains about what they are doing and what is working for them, and I've learned a lot from them. But I've also learned a lot from the other side, the customer side, that is. If you wanted to know how good a restaurant was, who would you ask? Yeah, the customers. I wanted to know more, so I asked her a few questions, and the entire time in what appeared to her as a common conversation, I was digging for gold. I wanted to know what it was that grabbed her this time. She looked to be a little younger than 40 years old and had tried churches before, but she stuck this time. What was it? Her words, "I already knew a few people that attended here, and I quickly got to know some new friends, and somehow I just felt a connection to the church. It felt like my home church from the beginning." Have I got a lot to share in this chapter, so hold on and get ready to highlight a lot, because the information in this section could impact your church more than anything you've ever heard. Page 31. The power of connecting. The power of connecting is stronger than many of us have ever realized. If you truly want to retain people, you absolutely must develop a church that knows how to connect with people. If you miss this, you will be wasting your time on all the other parts. One of your goals has to be to develop a culture within the church that celebrates the ideal of connecting with new people. I know that some people are shy and there are lots of inner circles or cliques, but you have to help people bust loose from those things. You have to equip them and encourage them to play in the game, not just hang out in the stadium. So many stagnant churches have groups of people who huddle up all by themselves before, during, and after church services, and they have these internal networks of people who call only each other during the week. Believe me, you don't want that isolated us versus them club feeling in your church. A guest can feel it instantly, and to be blunt, it's the complete opposite of the Spirit of Christ. Some of the people reading this book are thinking about their church right now and say, "Oh no, that's us." I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but I am going to challenge you to change. The past can't change, but the future can. There are a lot of churches that fall into that category, but there is also a foraging group of churches flourishing and seeing lots of fresh growth. It's exciting to see these churches reaping such a great harvest, and I found that one of the top reasons for their success is their intentional focus on creating connections. Page 32. If they don't connect, they don't stay. There is enormous power in the event of making a real connection with another person or with a group of people. When we're talking about something like church, where Jesus said that he was not going to do it himself in person any longer, but that he was going to use us to get his job done, connecting becomes a very important piece of the puzzle. If we never truly connect with other people, how are we supposed to share what Jesus wanted us to share? A big part of winning people to Jesus is we have to win them to us first. Long-term people fall away if they don't connect. They may start, but if they don't connect, they usually don't finish the race. Honestly, most churches need a strategy meeting about how to connect with people much more than they need another 3-day revival. If we believe that he that endures to the end, the same shall be saved, the one of the best things we can do to see more people make it to heaven and have long-term growth in our church is to learn how to effectively connect with people. I've spoken all over the country on the subject of connecting, and I genuinely believe it can help turn struggling churches around, and it can help churches who are already doing well do even better. I've narrowed it down to 3 main points when it comes to the subject of connecting. 1. Intentional connections with unchurched people. 2. Immediate connection at your church. 3. Long-term connections within your church. When you create a strategic plan for each one of these in your church, you will see the impact immediately. Let's dig into the details on each one of these. Page 33. Intentional connections with unchurched people. You could say that this particular point belongs in an outreach book, and it is a great point for outreach and evangelism, but it's also a great point for retention. You'll see what I mean. Here's the idea. People who already have a relationship with a Christian are much more likely to decide to be a Christian themselves. That's not just my opinion, but it's also a proven fact. Page 34. We can't forget or underestimate the power of influence. I'm sure you can look back and think of a person who has had a huge influence on your life. They did that by speaking into your life, inviting you into their life, spending time with you, being there for you, and listening to you. The first day you met them, you probably had no idea it would turn into what it has turned into. But now you can look back and say, they've had a huge impact on my life, and I wouldn't be what I am today if it weren't for their influence. We have to understand that we have an impact on everybody who is around us. That's just the way it works. If somebody is around us over a period of time, we begin to have an impact on them. This is the reason that we as Christians have to intentionally connect and spend time with people that don't know God. I'm talking about people who have never repented, never been baptized, and may not have been to a church in several years, if ever. How many of those people are in your life? How many of those people do you spend time with every week intentionally? If they're not in your life, how are you ever going to have an impact on them? It is 100% absolutely without a doubt impossible for a church to grow if the Christians don't connect with people that need Jesus. Page 35. More than telling them. In times past, evangelism was all about telling people something and about giving information to them about a God who loves them. But that's not good enough. What we've learned is that we've got to do more than tell them about a God who loves them. We've got to love them. Do we need to preach the word? Absolutely. But real life change happens through relationships. Relationships happen in the little daily details, like watching a baseball game, grilling out, going fishing, or going shopping. And when you invite people into your group to do the things you're already doing, they think you care. And when they think you care, they start to open up to the idea that God cares. Corn seed. Last year, I spent a lot of time studying the subject of how ideas spread, and it really impacts the way I see church growth, especially the area of retention. It blew me away when I realized the way that people adopt new ideas. Spreading an ideal is really what the local church is all about, so I was super interested to learn more. In 1928, the University of Iowa released a new hybrid corn seed that was superior to the traditional corn seed in every way that corn seed can be superior. Right up front, it produced 20% more corn than the traditional corn seed. It was also proven to be more drought resistant and more disease resistant, and it was clearly superior to the traditional corn seed. It was a big deal and an exciting day when they decided to launch the new corn seed. The professors, lab technicians, extension agents, and seed salesmen were talking about it and promoting it everywhere. But with all the fanfare, research, and proof, out of 259 farmers who were originally introduced to it, only 2 guys started using the new corn seed. The second year, there were 2 more. The next year, there were 4 more. And it wasn't until the 7th year that they had more than 10 new farmers start using the new seed. But after the 7th year, there was a huge upswing in the number of farmers who started using the new seed, and the group grew at a tremendous rapid pace. By the year 1941, there was a clear majority of the original 259 farmers using the new corn seed. But the mass usage didn't start until a fairly large number of people within that group were already using it. Page 36. They're not listening. The whole corn seed deal makes me think about this. With all that information and with all the facts and studies, why did only 2 farmers try the new seed? And the answer is that they weren't listening. They weren't listening to the extension agents or the scientists. They were more interested in what their group was doing. There were 2 farmers who were willing to take the risk, but the majority of them decided to play it safe and stick with their group. Most people don't evaluate a new idea based on the proof. In other words, when it comes to new ideas, people typically don't try new things because an expert gave them enough proven facts about it. To put this in spiritual terms, most people who need God don't listen to a message about Jesus from a preacher. We think that if we give them enough facts and enough information, they'll make a decision to try something new. But that's not how people do it. There are a few people that do, but most people don't adopt new ideas or try new products based on what the experts tell them. Instead, most people depend mainly on how they feel about something that is conveyed to them, not by the experts, gurus, scientists, preachers, but by other people in their group. Let me try to make it clearer. It's practically impossible for people to adopt an idea, any idea, when it goes against their thinking of their group. If my group doesn't use the new corn seed, even though the experts tell me it's much better, it's almost impossible for me to use the new corn seed. And when a large number of the people in my group start using the new corn seed, it's impossible for me not to consider trying it myself. Page 37. Inviting them in. The world is full of groups, and when we get more people inside the influence of our group, they are much more likely to make a decision to try Jesus. We have to do more than stand inside our group and scream across at their group. Here are the options we have. 1. Stay in our group, let them stay in their group, and scream across the valley at them, telling them what they need to do. 2. Walk across to their group and get to know one of the people and tell them about Jesus. 3. Invite them into our group to do the things we're already doing and develop a real relationship with them. Option number 1 is not going to work because no matter how loud we scream and no matter how true our screams are, they're not listening. Option number 2 is better, but the big problem is that they're still in that group, and as we know, it's almost impossible for them to make a decision against the thinking of their group. So that leaves us with option number 3, which is the most powerful approach because not only are we making an impact on them with our words, but we are inviting them into an environment where they are much more likely to make a decision to try Jesus. It's easier because they are in a group where a lot of the people are already living for Jesus. We can't be ignorant of this. If the sinners stay in their groups and the Christians stay in their groups, how will we ever win the world? We didn't try Jesus on our own, and we shouldn't ask sinners to do it either. Page 38. Army Action. One of the greatest things you can do for your church is to teach this concept to them and show them the impact they could have by intentionally connecting with 1 or 2 people outside the church. Make it clear what the goal is and why this is so valuable. Make sure they understand that you aren't asking them to do anything radically bold, but just to connect with 1 or 2 unchurched people on a regular basis. Once every week or 2 can make a giant impression and create a fantastic connection, inviting them to things you are already doing. like cooking out, going to a ball game, or going shopping. Think about the impact your church could have if each person started reaching out to just one person. I'm not talking about preaching at them, but just developing a connection with them. When you and your army start doing this, God will start to deal with the hearts of those people, and they will be in an environment where they won't be afraid to take that step toward God. Page 39. Immediate connections at your church. People who try your church don't decide whether they will come back based on the music and not based on some of the other things that we spend so much time on. You may have been thinking it was the music or something else that causes people to return to your church, but it's not. Those things are good, and we need good music, youth programs, and preaching, but it's not even a fantastic message that causes a person to decide whether or not they'll return. In fact, the majority of people make up their minds whether or not they will ever return to your church within the first 10 minutes of arriving at your property. And that's before the singing starts and way before the preaching starts. So what are they looking for? So what is it that they are using to make their judgment? How do they decide if they will ever come back or not? There are two environments they are analyzing when they try your church. The first thing that a guest is analyzing is the physical property. There's a special picture we have in our family. The first time we went to Disney World, we walked into the front gates, and when we looked down Disney's Main Street and caught a view of the castle for the first time, it was like magic. Our boys were 8 and 6, and when that emotion hit them, Adam, the youngest, grabbed Avery around his neck and hugged him like there was no tomorrow. Lisa snapped a picture of that, and it's been one of our favorite pictures ever since. When I look at that picture from time to time, I'm so surprised at how much the boys have grown. I'm around them every day, and I just don't notice how much they have grown. But when I look at that picture, I am blown away. When you are around something or somebody every day, you don't notice as they are changing. Page 40. The 2 E's. When we are around something every day, it's hard for us to see it like other people see it. What about your church property? How would it look to a person if this was their first time to ever see it? Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not talking about having a luxury location or a brand new facility. I'm talking about the 2 E's. Excellence and ease. Excellence. When people see our property for the first time, they need to see excellence. The carpet doesn't have to be brand new, but it needs to be clean. The siding doesn't have to be brand new, but it needs to be washed. The restrooms don't have to be state-of-the-art, but the writing on the wall should be cleaned off or painted over. Whenever we have a sloppy facility, it speaks loudly to our guests about how important the church is to us. In consulting with so many churches, I always look at their property when I first drive up. The first time I walk in the front entrance, I try to view it like a brand new guest would. Here are some of the things I see. The grass is overgrown. The paint on the sign is chipping off. The carpet is dirty. No toilet paper or paper towels in the restroom. Graffiti on the restroom walls. Yes, seriously. Page 41. Ease. Here are a couple of guest questions to ask your team. Is it easy for guests to do what everybody else is doing? Do they know where to go and what to do? Or is it so difficult the guests have to find somebody and ask? Since we've been in the church for so long, we know where everything is and how it all works. We fail to remember that new guests don't know these things. We need to set things up to make it as easy and as comfortable as possible for them. Here are a few common issues which make it not so easy for guests. It's hard to find a parking space. It's not clear which door I should use to enter the building. It isn't clear where my kids should go or when they should go. Signage is poor, so I can't find the restrooms. Most churches should double their sign usage. When a visitor drives onto your church property, there are two options for them. One, it will feel like this is a place where guests are welcome. Two, it will feel like a place for insiders only. Your property is the first thing people encounter. Make it excellent and easy to navigate, and you will remove one of the reasons they could use for not coming back. The second thing that a guest is analyzing is the immediate connection and rapport with the people. This is something a guest knows almost immediately when they come in contact with the people of your church. Whether it's the guy directing traffic or the person opening the church doors and greeting them, they can tell. It doesn't even take 5 minutes. They know it almost immediately, just like you do. It doesn't take you long to size things up when you walk into a room or into a group of people, does it? You can size it up quickly. Page 42. Our sixth sense. The reason I can, you can, and they can do this is because there is a sixth sense that everybody uses when it comes to communicating. We all have it and use it every day, but especially when we encounter new places and new people. It's the sensitivity we have and the ability to process body language. We learn a lot of things with our 5 senses: touching, tasting, hearing, seeing, smelling. But when it comes to face-to-face communication, we learn more by body language than anything else. Even more than the words they say, we learn more about them by their body language. Actually, when you have face-to-face interaction with somebody, you form a big part of your opinion within the first 3 to 5 seconds. How? You instantly read their body language. For example, if you are married, think about when you come home in the afternoon and you walk in the door and see your spouse across the room. Can you not tell what kind of mood they're in before they ever say a word? Sure you can. How is that possible? It's because we communicate more by body language than anything else. Albert Moranian was a professor of psychology at UCLA who studied human behavior extensively. His research led him to discover the 7-38-55 rule, which has been used in human communication seminars all over the world. The 7-38-55 rule basically says this: when it comes to human interactions, only 7% is verbal, 38% is vocal, and 55% is visual. 7% has to do with our words, 38% has to do with our tone of voice, and 55% has to do with our body language. Wow! Listen, your clearest communication comes not from your words, but from your body language. Page 43. Why it matters. Some of you are saying, what in the world does this have to do with church growth? Check it out. Imagine that we have a brand new guest coming into our church, and they are trying to read the environment. Subconsciously, they're asking a list of questions. Is this a good place? Am I going to enjoy this? Are we welcome here? Are these people friendly or stuck up? They get these answers from the first people they come in contact with. Those people send your guests a clear message. It may not be the message you want them to send, but they are sending a clear message. And it's not coming from their words. It's coming from their body language. I remember a friend of mine who normally attended church about 25 minutes from his house. One Wednesday night, he couldn't get to his church because some of the roads were flooded from a storm, so he decided to visit a church nearby his house. When he walked in, everybody turned around and stared at him as to say, "Who are you? And what are you doing here?" He said they weren't rude with their words, but he felt so out of place by their actions. Try these questions. What is it like when a person comes to your church for the first time? How do they feel when they walk in the doors for the very first time? I never talked to any church leader who said, "Our church is rude and stuck up." Everybody tells me that they have the friendliest church in town. But how does it feel to a person coming in for the first time? Is it weird? Do they feel isolated? Is there a place for them to mingle with other people in a comfortable way? Pages 44 and 45. Attitude is the driver. Attitude is the most important factor in connecting. Body language is the most dominant force in our face-to-face communications. But what drives that? What causes your body language to be what it is? The answer is attitude. Attitude drives your body language. How you feel about somebody comes through in your body language toward them. If we don't care about the unchurched, if we don't care about the people in our town that are going to hell if they don't find Jesus, if our attitude toward them is that we don't really want to mess with them or spend time helping them turn their lives around, that's where we should start. In fact, from this point forward, you would be completely naive to believe that this book or any other book will ever help your church grow if you and your core members don't truly care about the unchurched and have a passion for the lost. Your attitude will come through in your body language, and they won't feel welcome, wanted, or comfortable, no matter what your words are. Most of the people that visit your church can't quote any scriptures, and they don't know anything about any doctrine. What they do know is that they need something in their life, and if they can walk into your church and connect with some genuine people, and then connect with Jesus Christ, you won't have to worry about them sticking around. But don't expect them to connect with the Christ if they don't connect with the Christians. Don't expect them to think He cares if they don't think that we care. We are ambassadors and representatives of the God that they need. And when we pray, repent, get a burden, and truly care about them, it will come through clearly, and they will love what they experience when they try our church. Page 46. 3 rights can't be wrong. Let's talk about exactly how we can create a great immediate connection. I recommend that you use the principle of the 3 rights. Here it is. You need to have the right people in the right places at the right times. We're talking about the frontline experience people will have when they try your church. Who are the right people? The right people are the most positive, happy, joy-filled, and loving people in your church. These are the people who truly care about unchurched people. They'll be smiling, greeting, and making people feel welcome. And here's a tip that will save you at least 100 hours of grief. Don't pick the people you want and try to teach them to smile. Pick the people who smile all the time and teach them how to do the job. Here's an action step that you can take today. Go through the list of people in your church and draw a star beside the ones that A, genuinely care about unchurched people, B, are always smiling, 3, don't gossip. Congrats! You just chose the people who need to be on your front lines. What are the right places? When it comes to connecting with new guests, where are the right places? Yeah, this is simple. We need to be at the main doors, in the foyer, out on the porch, guiding traffic and making sure guests have good parking spots. Wherever guests are, those are the right places. What are the right times? We have the right people and we know the right places. But what about the right times? 5 minutes before service? 10 minutes before service time? No, the people need to be on spot a minimum of 30 to 40 minutes prior to every service. Prefer 1 hour. Your guests should never beat your greeters. You're probably saying, wow, that's simple. It is simple, but most churches don't commit to it. And when they miss these things, it can destroy the chances that a first-time guest will ever return again. Pages 47 and 48. Long-term connections within your church. Check out this statistic. People will leave your church within 4 months if they don't develop a long-term connection with somebody. Not just a hello or a card, but a real connection. You can probably look back and remember people who came in and tried your church for a while, but then they're gone, and you're wondering why that keeps happening. This is the reason. They're not connecting. It has nothing to do with whether they like the music, or if they believe in God, or if they like the preaching. If they don't connect, they don't stay. People need to have that intimate connection before they ever decide to come back. But after they come back, they need to develop some long-term connections, or there is an extremely high chance they'll fade away. Intentional friendliness. Long-term relationships are never going to form between the current members of your church and the newer people coming into your church, unless your church is intentionally friendly. I really believe this is one of the reasons churches struggle to grow at all. If people come to your church and like the initial experience, but they continue to feel like a visitor, they will probably find somewhere else to try. If you consider yourself to be a part of the church family, you should be up moving around before and after every service, connecting with people on a personal level, asking questions, being interested, and making them feel like a part of the family. Maybe you're shy and it's not natural for you to walk up to new people, but challenge yourself to try. And if you're an outgoing person, make sure you intentionally reach out to the newer people in your church. If they sit alone without much interaction, they will start feeling like this isn't the place for them, and rightfully so. To make this happen in your church, you need to be clear to the church what you expect them to do and why it's important. Mark on your calendar every 6 months to do this. At the end of service, ask all the people who call this their home church to stay for a quick 10-minute meeting after the service is dismissed. You can dismiss, let people talk for a few minutes, then start your meeting and cover these 3 things. 1. Remind them that they need to intentionally show interest and be friendly to the newer people in the church at every service. 2. Give them some practical ideas and pointers of exactly how to do that. 3. Explain why this is so important. It's easy to get into a routine where we go to the same people, talk to our group of friends, and forget about the newer people. When you do this every 6 months, it keeps it at the front of your memory, and you will see the atmosphere before and after services improve, and people will feel more welcome and assimilate into the church family more quickly and easily. Page 49. How any church can keep everybody connected. Most churches just wait and see what happens, but growing churches create lots of opportunities for connections to form. There are a couple of things that any church can do that will help them keep everybody connected. 1. Connection events. 2. Serving opportunities. One of the things I recommend for every church to implement immediately is connection events. Connection events are events planned for no other reason than to provide a no-pressure, fun, comfortable environment where it's easy for people to come and connect with others. These events are designed to be fun and easy for guests and newer people to come, and the goal is to create a great opportunity for long-term connections to happen. Remember, you can't force people to do things. You can't point a gun at the newer people in your church and demand that they develop friendships, although that might be easier. The only way you will ever see this happen is if you create opportunities for it to happen. Connection events are easy to put together, and you don't have to spend a fortune on them. Things that will include everybody are things like picnic at the park, gym night playing basketball and volleyball, carnival in your parking lot, family bowling night, church-wide barbecue. Just be creative and remember the goal. And what will happen through these events is that long-term friendships will start to develop and people will start to do things on their own and bond. That's the when. The next question is, how often? How often should we schedule these connection events? Think about the stats. Since we know that people are going to leave if they don't make a long-term connection within 4 months, we need to make sure these events are scheduled more frequently than that. So, we need to schedule these events every 3 months at a minimum. Make sense? Page 50. Serving ops. We all know that there are certain people that seem to end up doing most of the work, right? But there is something we can do to take some of the workload off of them, and it's actually the second part of keeping everybody connected. I'm talking about serving opportunities. There are lots of things that people can do to get involved and help out even if they haven't fully committed to Jesus yet. Churches are letting people slip away because of this crazy notion that people have to be spiritual giants before they can get involved in anything. And the more they get involved, the more apt they are to stay long enough to make a commitment. We want to get people involved in serving opportunities, like grilling hot dogs and delivering tables, and working on the setup and teardown team, blowing up balloons and hooking up microphones. Every different church will have a different opinion about what they can get involved in. But the key is to get them involved, because while they are serving, they are creating relationships and getting connected to the people in the church. Boom! That's the goal. Think about this. Inviting them to the barbecue is great, but what if Joe, who has been attending for 6 weeks, gets a call from somebody he has met at the church and they say, "Joe, you know we're having this barbecue on Saturday and it's going to be a lot of fun, but I need somebody to help me transport the tables from the church to the park. Is there any way you could meet me at the church Saturday morning and help me with that?" Do you think Joe will connect more as he is carrying the tables and getting that job done than if he just came and ate a plate of barbecue? Absolutely. One particular church that I worked with for a few months got such a boost from this one part of the plan. They were blown away by the impact these connection events had on their church. They spent a couple of weeks meeting with their staff and really talking about why this was important and what was the goal, and then they started planning. From that point forward, the entire atmosphere of the church was changed. Some people ask me, "Isn't this just another church get-together?" And the answer is no. It's different because of the purpose of it and the way we prepare for it. If we don't remember what the purpose is, it will definitely turn into just another church get-together. The key to this entire plan is that we get the guests from the past few months invited and involved. You should read back over the last line a few times, because that one key will determine the majority of your success with this. Page 51. No clicks allowed. This part is obvious, but since I've seen so many church people stand off in their own circles and watch the newer people from across the yard, I have to say it. The core people actually have to reach out and connect with the newer people during these events. We don't need another club meeting. We need to stretch ourselves to reach out to people outside our group and to help them feel welcome and valued. The purpose of these events is connecting with new people, finding out what their interests are, learning about their families, and allowing long-term relationships to form. We need to make sure we know who our guests are from the past few months and get them connected through these events. Call them, send them cards, talk to them about helping, and get them involved. Do whatever it takes. These events are set up not just to spend money, but to serve as an easy and comfortable atmosphere for people to connect, not only with your connection events, but think of every possible opportunity to get new people involved. One of the best places to get them involved is in your outreach efforts. Newer people are some of the most excited and passionate people in your church, and they are perfect for doing outreach. Know who they are. Get them invited. Get them involved. Get them connected. Remember, if they don't connect, they don't stay. Page 52. Connect groups. I want to mention one other way that you can help long-term connections develop in your church. It's very effective, but it takes quite a bit of preparation and management. And even though I believe in it strongly, not every church is ready to start connect groups right now. With that disclaimer out of the way, let me say that creating connect groups is one of the greatest ways for a church to create connections and develop long-term relationships. These groups meet regularly, usually weekly, in homes for the express purpose of connecting. The toughest thing for most Christians to grasp is that this is not a Bible study group. Even though there is a Bible discussion at most of the meetings, it isn't a Bible study. We definitely need Bible studies happening in our churches, but the purpose of a connect group is not to teach the Bible. The purpose is for people to connect. The most important part of this plan is finding and training hosts. These are the people who will host the group in their home each week, and while it's not necessary that they be a Bible scholar, they do need to be dependable. Here are some overview points about connect groups. There's a clear start time and ending time. The host needs to have the means or a plan to handle the expenses of things such as food. There is food of some kind provided. There is a Bible discussion. You should have all the groups doing the same lesson discussion, which is prepared and distributed to the host. There is a time for prayer. The atmosphere is relaxed and comfortable. The goal is to get people involved in a connect group where the other members intentionally connect with them. This takes planning, organization, and communicating, but it is a very effective way to help people feel like your church is their church. Page 53. Not yet. Your church eventually needs to have connect groups in place, but I want you to do everything in this book before you start connect groups. Once you've checked off everything on the action list in this book, then I want you to start planning toward connect groups. I know you want to do it all right now, but don't rush into this one. Get everything else checked off first, then start connect groups. Page 54. Closing thoughts. So many churches work hard to get the programs and structures just right and wonder why they still aren't seeing very much growth. The issue is that the people in the church aren't connecting with the unchurched people or newcomers. One of the biggest problems churches are facing today is that the church people are too weird. That's right, they are weird. You know it's true. They over-spiritualize everything, and they have trouble even carrying on a decent conversation with the person that isn't a Christian. We've got to do better with this. If people aren't comfortable around us, they won't stay long. And I don't blame them. You cannot miss this. Work hard to create a culture of connecting within your church. Challenge your church to connect with unchurched people. Work on the immediate connection people experience. The facility should show excellence and be easy to navigate. Have the right people in the right places at the right times to guarantee a great initial connection. Help long-term connections develop in your church through intentional friendliness at your church services, connection events, serving opportunities. Churches that connect grow no matter what the doctrine is. You need the power of connecting working in your church. Page 55. Get your free video now. www.retention101.net/jumpstart. Chapter 4. The Value of Tracking. Pages 56 and 57. I'm sure you can probably remember when you were in elementary school, the first thing that happened when you walked into the classroom. John? Here. Sam? Here. Brian? Here. They would go through the entire list, and the teacher would simply make a mark beside each name indicating whether or not they were there. Simple, right? What about the local church? Do we keep good records and make sure we know who is in the building at any given time? What I found is that there is a surprisingly low percentage of churches who focus very much, if at all, on attendance tracking. Some people say, why does this matter? Or why should we spend our time on this? One way to think about this is to ask ourselves, how would we benefit from doing this? If we were really good at gathering attendance data, if we had a smooth system or software for analyzing that data, what would we gain from it? Let's start with these. Knowing who our first-time guests are, knowing who our second-time guests are, knowing who is attending regularly, knowing who was absent last Sunday, knowing who is showing signs of slipping away. If you're asking me, and by reading this book you are, I believe 100% in the ideal of having a crisp system for gathering detailed attendance data for each of our church services. In fact, I believe every church, no matter what the size or denomination, should have some kind of system in place where they not only know how many people were there, but they know exactly who the people were. I have helped hundreds of churches, and one of the questions I ask them is, what is your system for tracking attendance? And I usually get one of two answers. They either tell me how they come up with the number of people who were there in their service. Example, one of our ladies sits in the back and counts during the worship service. Or they start telling me about the guest cards that they use to get visitor information. Well, neither of those things is bad, but we need more. Knowing head count is fine. You definitely need to know who your guests were. But we don't need to stop there. Each church needs a system for taking detailed attendance. Churches need a system to know who was there. Guests, backsliders, longtime veterans who have been attending for 50 years, everybody. If you don't know who was there, how can you possibly do true follow-up? One of the taglines I have used diligently over the past few years is this: follow-up is a major key to retention, but attendance tracking is the key to follow-up. Page 58. Not just first-timers. One of the great misunderstandings about tracking attendance is that it's not only for guests. Lots of churches have some type of visitor card where they try to get personal information from their first-time guests. But what about everybody else? What about second-time guests and regular attenders? Focusing on first-time guests is a good idea, but it's not a complete plan. Remember, retention is about keeping everybody possible, not just the first-timers. Proven effective methods. Just pick one. In this chapter, we're talking about the value of tracking attendance and the importance of having a good system for gathering this information. Some of you may be saying, Brian, instead of me trying to figure this out on my own, why don't you just tell me how to do this? Good idea. Instead of leaving you to figure out how, I thought it would be a great idea to give you the details of exactly how some of the most effective churches in America are doing it. Lots of people have the tendency to feel like they have to come up with everything on their own and design their own unique plan. But the most successful people in the world model a lot of their behavior after other successful people. Churches should be the same way. The goal is to help as many people get to heaven as possible, not to come up with as many unique methods as possible. So I'm going to give you the details of two of the most effective methods for gathering attendance data. If you have a different method that works better for you, that's great. But if not, just pick one of these and go for it. Page 59. Checklist tracking. This is a system where you will have greeters, people tracking attendance, and people at a guest information station working together near the entrance of the building. Here's the overview. The greeters welcome everybody and try their best to recognize the guests. If they recognize a guest, they ask them if this is their first time here. If they say yes, the greeter welcomes them and carries them to the guest information station where they fill out a quick info card. Some churches give a small gift at the station or enter their card into a drawing for something like a restaurant certificate, which is given away during that service. While people are entering the building, the attendance trackers are checking off the names on their list. With this method, make sure that everybody enters the building through a central set of doors. If you have multiple doors, you need to lock all of them except the main entrance. At least 45 minutes before service time, you need to have your teams in place. You need at least 2 people using a checklist to mark the people who are regular attenders. There also needs to be at least 1 greeter with this team so that if they don't know who a person is, the greeter can step over, speak to them, and get their name. Make sure the checklist is printed and ready. Page 60. Connect card. For some churches, it will be impossible to use the checklist method. If your attendance is over 250 people, or if your church is aggressive with outreach and you have several guests at each service, it's going to be frustrating to try the checklist method. In these cases, the method I recommend for your church is the Connect card. I get a lot of pushback and resistance with this method because it's different than most of the traditional methods. But the reason I recommend it is because it's very effective. And once your church gets familiar with it, it becomes very natural and flows smoothly. I'm very observant when I visit a new church. I like to see how they operate so I can learn from them, both the good and the bad. The first time I saw the Connect card method in action, I was surprised at how simple it was. I actually thought to myself that this was probably an incomplete system and that there was probably some missing component to it. But as I went back and replayed it in my mind over and over, I was impressed. As of today, I have introduced hundreds of churches to the Connect card method. Page 61. Here's the way it works. Blank Connect cards and pens with the church info on them are placed at every seat in the building. At some point during the service, somebody steps into the microphone and says this: "Here at the Life Church, we love to stay connected. Quickly, I want everybody to grab the Connect card in front of you and grab a pen. Go ahead and write your name and info for us, just so we have a record that you were here today. If you are a guest, please check that box. If you have anything that you want us to help you pray about, flip it over and write that in the prayer request section. We want everybody to fill one of these out, so look around right now and make sure all the people on your row have one. There are also some things you can get involved in on the back. If you're interested in getting involved in any of them, just check the box. When you do this, it creates an atmosphere where people feel out of place if they don't fill one out. Everybody is writing, people are handing them a card and pen, and they feel out of place if they don't do it. You probably won't get 100%, but with a little work, you can get a high percentage of people to participate. I have a lot of people that ask about the card. What's on it? What is it supposed to look like? I actually got one from a church who's using this method, made a couple small changes to it, and that's what we use today. There is an example on the next page. Page 62. Page 62 shows an example of the front and back of the Connect card. Please view it in your book. Page 63. On the front, we have the basic personal information. Then on the back, we give opportunities for the people to get involved and to submit their prayer request. Keep the info on the back fresh and updated. As you learn to use it, you will see that this is a great way to get people to participate in upcoming projects, outreaches, classes, etc. Instead of printing off another sign-up sheet and trying to get people to go to the bulletin board and sign up, you just put it on the card and get them to check the box if they're interested. The bottom section on the back is for the prayer request. Everybody has needs, problems, and situations they want the church to pray about. Let's not forget that Jesus said that his house should be called a house of prayer. But it's not very effective to have everybody raise their hands and tell their needs. And honestly, if they did, how many of them could you remember? But with the Connect card, you have it written down. Your team goes through the cards, sorts out the ones with prayer requests, gets that information to the prayer team, and nobody gets left out. Print these on nice thick cardstock paper so it's easy for the people to write on, and size them so you can print 4 cards per page. Resistance to the Connect card. Believe it or not, the toughest part of this method is actually getting your regular people to do it. I know it sounds odd, but for some reason, they think that since they have been attending so long, that they don't have to play alone. Make sure you educate all the regulars on why this is important and the reasons you are doing it. They have to see how valuable it is. One of the things I hear a lot is that people keep stealing the pens. Hello, that's a good thing. It has your church name on it, and people are taking them out into the world for you. That's not a problem. That's a blessing. Plus, pens with your church name on them are so inexpensive online. You can get 2,000 for about $1. Well, maybe I'm exaggerating a little, but you get the point. Another pushback to this method is that it costs a little money to print the cards each week. Yes, you have to print the cards and buy the pens. But if you are at the point where you cannot accurately keep up with things with the checklist method or any other method you may have tried, please don't be so cheap that you ignore the importance of having this data just because it costs a little money. Page 64. Attendance tracking is critical. I know it sounds simple, and it is simple, but how many times do marriages, businesses, and other organizations neglect to take care of the simple things, and it ends up being much more important than they ever imagined? How many companies have went bankrupt because they didn't take care of the little things? How many marriages have failed because they didn't pay attention to the things that seem small? Churches are in danger of the same thing, so we have to stay in tune with the details. This is one of the details that churches miss, and sometimes it's discounted as being somewhat unimportant. They keep trying the latest program, but wondering why nobody is staying. When it comes to retention, if you want to see it get better in your church, you have to focus on attendance tracking. Tracking attendance is foundational and critical to the growth of your church. Get a team together and make it happen. It will take a little effort, but it will be worth it. Maybe you have a system that works better for you than any of these. If you do, that's great. In fact, I would personally love to hear about it. If you don't have a system in place, please don't think you have to reinvent the wheel and come up with a crafty plan of your own. Pick one of these proven methods and go for it. Get a team together, go over it with them, and get it implemented in your church. It's one of the unsung heroes of retention, but take my word for it, it's going to make a difference in your church. Page 65. Software that helps. Not only do you need a method for gathering attendance data, but you also need a system or software to analyze that information. Imagine for a moment that a chef bought all of the ingredients for a fantastic dish, and it would have been delicious except for one thing. Instead of cooking the meal, he just left the ingredients sitting on the counter. The point is that in order to create a great outcome, he has to do something with the ingredients. One of the top reasons churches get sloppy with follow-up is because of the task of keeping up with all the information gets so confusing they just quit, especially if the church is aggressive with outreach. Keeping up with the details is practically impossible without using a piece of software specifically designed to help you in that area. Who were our second-time guests this week? Have they been here before? Because I think I remember them visiting last month. Who has missed 3 consecutive services? Who all was absent today? These are great examples of information that your church needs to know. But being able to produce that data without having a full-time employee shifting through it all and pulling their hair out is a nightmare. I personally love spreadsheets, and I use spreadsheets for a lot of things. But I need more than a spreadsheet to give me the results I need to have an effective follow-up system. Page 66. Personal tip. And there are several software systems on the market that can help you keep track of your attendance and produce some nice reports. If you're already using one of those and you're happy with it, that's great. But if not, I'm going to tip you off to one of the tools I use. I don't have time to take on too many churches, but I do spend some of my time doing personal one-on-one coaching with a few churches each year that are very serious about growing. When I'm helping them structure for growth, this is one of the tools I give them, and it always blows them away. It's called ChurchTracer.com. It's a web-based attendance and follow-up software that is so easy to use, and it's really effective. It has the most intuitive follow-up component I've ever seen. Once you set it up, all you have to do is input your attendance data, and the system automatically reminds you daily of what tasks need to be done. You can get email reminders, first and second time guest reports, absentee list, and a lot more. It's all automated, and the best part is that it's so inexpensive that any church of any size can afford it. One of the reasons I recommend ChurchTracer.com is because of my personal belief about the debilitating power of discouragement. I've talked to so many pastors and church leaders who have told me that they tried to keep up with the attendance information before, but things kept slipping through the cracks. They didn't notice somebody had missed 3 or 4 services in a row, a guest didn't get a personal visit, or some other task slips, and they became frustrated and discouraged. This is where the devil comes in and starts working. They were doing their best, but a few things slipped, and the devil starts telling them that they aren't doing a good job and their church is never going to grow. Maybe you've experienced that before. That feeling of discouragement can pull you down so quickly and cause you to feel like quitting. But it doesn't have to be that way. The Church Tracer system has built-in accountability, which makes it impossible for things to slip through the cracks. Maybe you already have a software that works well for you, and if you do, that's fine. But just make sure it's giving you the results you need to be effective, not just a pile of not so helpful reports. If you don't have software, don't be intimidated because you think it's going to be expensive and difficult to learn. Go to churchtracer.com and sign up today. Throughout this book, especially in the chapter about follow-up, I mention printing certain reports, and Church Tracer can do every single one of them for you. It will take a lot of the frustration away and give you an edge when it comes to retention. Page 67. Closing thoughts. Attendance tracking is like a pillar that holds up a building. It doesn't get a lot of recognition, but it's almost impossible for that building to stay standing without it. I've given you the exact details of a couple of ways you may want to do this. But honestly, I don't care what method you use. Just use something that works. Take the time to implement a system for gathering detailed attendance data for each service, and make the effort to get software that will help you make the most of the data you gathered. If you have never focused on these things, it's natural for you to feel a little awkward about it, but you will quickly start seeing the impact they have on your church. Chapter 5, page 68. Focus on follow-up. If follow-up is not near the top of your priority list, you are going to see very limited growth in your church. Talking about follow-up is good, but the thing that makes it all happen is when the church leaders actually make it a priority. Page 69. For so many churches, despite what they say, follow-up is simply not a priority. The things which are highest on your priority list are the things that get done. If it's not getting done, it's not high enough on the priority list. No excuses, that's just the way it is. Some churches are unsure of what to do when it comes to follow-up, and some have tried some things that didn't work, so they quit. But if we are ever going to fulfill the reason God created the church, we can't be satisfied with this trend. We need to get follow-up back near the top of our priority list. We can't neglect it. We can't just think it's going to happen on its own. We can't just hope they will come back week to week. We have to get very serious about our follow-up task. So serious that we take the time to talk about it, plan it out, and challenge ourselves to make it happen every single week. Honestly, if we're not keeping a lot of the people that visit our church, something or some things need to change. We need to refocus. We need to get our entire churches involved and work on this until we're so sticky that people can't let go once they come in contact with us. I love outreach, but why would we spend weeks planning an outreach event, spend hundreds of dollars on prizes to give away, but only spend 30 minutes talking about our system for follow-up? Why would we spend hours planning our weekend service, but act like the game is over on Sunday night with no plan for follow-up? Follow-up makes a difference. Follow-up makes a huge difference. Every church in the world needs to commit to focusing on it, and when we do that, we'll see more people stick. A lot of churches treat follow-up like it's a side thought, and they'll do it if it's convenient. But the churches who are experiencing a great harvest are doing so by deliberately focusing on follow-up. They also have people on their follow-up teams who are very committed and have a real desire to see lost people saved. As you will see from the step-by-step plan, it's not complicated, but it does require commitment and dedication. Page 70. Stop beating around the bush. When I first started working with churches, I didn't want to come across as being a know-it-all, so I would give concepts without giving an exact plan. But one pastor finally had enough and just said it. Stop beating around the bush and tell me exactly what we need to do. Thanks to that strong statement, I've been able to help so many churches with the plan I'm about to give to you. It's a plan that I created by taking notes from some of the most successful churches, quizzing some of the strongest church leaders in the country, and with a lot of trial and error. It's been refined as I've used it in some of the most challenging churches you can imagine, and it's a system that you can put into action immediately. Systematic. One thing you need to realize about follow-up is that you have to be very systematic and organized in order to be successful. In fact, I will rank this as being one of the top reasons follow-up efforts fall flat in so many churches. They start a follow-up program, but they aren't very organized, and they don't have a clear system. Over time, things become confusing, people become frustrated, and it falls apart. Follow-up is one thing that must be organized and systematic, or it will not work. I can hear some of you screaming at me right now, "I'm not organized or systematic." Don't worry. At the end of this chapter, I'm going to give you a quick tip that will solve that problem for you. Page 71. The plan. So let's get down to business and look at the follow-up plan that will help you keep more people. By breaking this down into 5 categories of people, you can see that your approach needs to be different for different people. The 5 categories of people that we need to focus on are: 1. First-time guests. 2. Second-time guests. 3. Regular attenders. 4. Slippers. 5. Staff and volunteers. I know a lot of you have been programmed to think only about first-time guests when you hear the word follow-up, but I want to show you a different way of thinking. All of these people matter, not only the first-time guests. And as you read through the next few pages, you will begin to see the importance of staying connected with each of these groups. Also, I'm going to show you what some more aggressive churches are doing to make a faster impact. If you're ready, here we go. First-time guest. Obviously, every first-time guest needs to be follow-up with. This is the most common form of follow-up. First-time guest follow-up is critical because it is the first time they will receive attention from your church. The impression you make on them during this process matters and will leave a lasting impact on them. Page 72. Following up with first-time guests is all about 3 things. 1. Showing interest in them. 2. Showing them that your church cares about them. 3. Showing them that they are welcome at your church. Here are the steps for first-time guests. Email within 24 hours. The first thing you want to do to follow up with a first-time guest is to send an email within 24 hours, preferably the same day they visit. If they visit on Sunday morning, have somebody who sends them an email Sunday afternoon or night. Somebody other than the pastor should send this email. All of the people who visit your church will not have email addresses, but a lot will, and they actually enjoy communicating that way. Send them a quick email with the right content, and don't be too wordy. The email should go something like this. Hey James, my name is Brian, and I'm from the Life Church. I just wanted to let you know that we're so glad you came. Thanks for taking the time to come. Also, just to be straightforward, we would love for you to come again next Sunday. You are definitely welcome here. I will pray for you this week, and if there's anything we can do for you, please let me know. Brian Davis, the Life Church. Page 73. Monday night follow up. The Monday after Sunday is extremely important when it comes to first-time guests. According to several sources, including our own in-house study, there is over an 80% better chance that a first-time guest will come back if you follow up with them within 36 hours after their first visit. Wow, that's why Monday nights are so important. By this time, many of them have received the email, but the personal follow-up is so important. 2 things. 1, the phone call. 2, the actual visit. The phone call. First, we make a very simple phone call. Make sure to practice this over and over so you and others on your team can do it smoothly and confidently. Hey James, this is Brian from the Life Church, where you visit yesterday. I'm calling for 2 reasons. 1, I just wanted to thank you for coming. And 2nd, it's our custom to bring a gift to everybody who visits our church. I'm going to be in your area tonight and I only have about 10 minutes. Would it work better for you if I came by at 6:30 or 7? My good friend Matt Maddox spent lots of time perfecting the content of that call, and it works great. If you will practice this and have your team practice it, you will rarely have anybody turn you down. Page 74. The actual visit. Compliment and 2 questions. Now that we have the first visit scheduled, we immediately go to their house with a nice gift bag or a gift item. Something nice, not cheesy. Once we get to their house, we go through a simple routine with a compliment and 2 questions. Here's the way it works. Once we arrive with our gift in hand, they will almost always invite you inside. Once inside, find something to compliment. I don't care what it is, the cat, the curtains, the color of the walls, whatever. Just compliment them on something. Next, ask them this. How did you hear about our church? Whatever they say, just listen. Don't respond with a sales pitch about your church. Just listen. Then say, well, we're glad you came. Before we go, let me ask you this. If there was one thing we could be praying for you about, what will it be? Once they answer, tell them that you'll be praying about that. Tell them that you hope to see them again this Sunday, and leave. Prayer. Prayer is a weapon that has been forgotten about by so many churches when it comes to follow-up. We pray about our needs and the needs of our close friends. But think about how Jesus operated his own personal ministry. He would come into a town, heal some people, perform some miracles, then preach the gospel. A few years ago, God convicted me strongly about this concept. The concept that there is no better way to have God on your team than by promoting the power of prayer. Pages 75 and 76. If you tell a guest that your church will be praying for them and God heals them, think about the potential. I'm not saying God will heal everybody that you pray for, but I am saying that he healed people time after time in the Bible in order to get their attention. So why wouldn't he do it for the guests that visit your church? When you ask people what their greatest need is, and then you and your church actually pray about it, you should expect God to answer those prayers. When God starts answering those prayers, those people will begin to recognize the power of the God they heard about at your church. He can choose to do something miraculous or something minor in their life. But the point is that we need the power of prayer operating in our follow-up efforts. If you ask the question exactly like I'm suggesting, almost 100% of the people will give you a prayer need that they have. Don't forget their need and don't take it lightly. Whatever they shared with you, is important to them, and they've trusted you with the heavy responsibility to deliver their needs to God and intercede for them. Whether you start a new prayer ministry to work with your follow-up teams, or if you already have a strong prayer ministry, make sure that every single one of these prayer requests gets into the hands of the prayer team. Pray over each of these needs and expect God to do great things in their lives. You also need to document their prayer requests. If you're using Church Tracer, there is a section for comments on their profile page. If you are using a different system, figure out a way to keep up with the prayer request people give to you, because it will be valuable later on for you to be able to look back and remember them. Handwritten note from pastor. No form letters on this one. You've seen those form letters that you can print out and sign it and try to make it personal, but you don't want to use a form letter for this particular part of your follow-up. If you are the pastor, I know you are busy, but you have to make time to do this. If you aren't the pastor, make sure your pastor reads this book and draw a big circle around this paragraph. It makes a huge difference if the pastor will actually take the time to sit down and handwrite a quick note to every first-time guest. Also, as you're writing these notes, pray over each person you're writing to. It needs to be mailed no later than the Wednesday after the first visit, so that it will arrive to them no later than Friday. It should be mailed in a hand-addressed envelope with a first-class stamp, and this is what it says. Hello, James. My name is John Doe, and I'm the pastor at the Life Church where you attended Sunday. I really appreciate you taking the time to come. I got your name from our guest list, and I just wanted to take a minute to connect with you. I've been praying for you this week, and if there is anything you need, please let us know. I don't want to take up a lot of your time. I just wanted to say thanks for coming and let you know that I hope to see you again this Sunday. God bless you. Hope to see you Sunday. Pastor John Doe. Page 77. 2 more things. The last 2 things you need to do with every first-time guest are: 1. Add their name to the list that you use to announce upcoming events. Hopefully you already have a mailing list that you use to announce upcoming events. If not, start one immediately and make sure you send invitations for everything going on at your church. They need to know continuously that they are welcome. Number 2, make sure they are invited and or involved in the upcoming connection event. Remember connection events? Don't forget that the key to a connection event is to get the guests from the past few months invited and involved. Make sure you get all of the first-time guests invited. Recap for the first-time guest. Email within 24 hours. Monday night, call to thank them for coming and set up time to deliver gift. Deliver gift. Compliment and ask the 2 questions. Get their prayer need to the prayer team and document their prayer need. Handwritten note from pastor in a hand-addressed envelope mailed no later than Wednesday. Their name goes on the list to receive notices of all upcoming events. Invite to upcoming connection event. Pages 78 and 79. Second-time guest. Most churches completely miss the value of following up with second-time guests. A lot of people may visit your church once because somebody pressured them into it or because of a giveaway. But when a person comes back a second time, there is a much better chance that they are actually serious about making a life change. It's almost as if they're waving their hands in the air, saying, I really am interested. Following up with second-time guests is all about getting them connected and involved and giving them the opportunity to start growing deeper. Since we know that there is a good chance this person is interested in attending our church regularly and growing in their relationship with God, we need to help them take those steps. The way to do that is by letting them know how to get involved in the things going on in the church, and also by inviting them to start growing in their relationship with God. We need to do 3 things. Make sure they feel valued. Show opportunities for them to get involved. Help them get started in a Bible study. Here are the specific things that you need to do with your second-time guest. Get connected. The first thing to do with second-time guests is to send them another note. This note is not a handwritten note, but a printed note. This Get Connected note should be mailed out to every second-time guest on the Monday after their second visit. This little note helps them feel value. It's low-pressured and friendly, and it shows some ways they can get involved. Here's an example. Please view page 79 for the example of the Get Connected note. Page 80. When you look at the example, notice that there are 5 parts to this note. 1. Thanks for coming again. 2. Inviting them to get involved. 3. Showing them some upcoming opportunities to get involved. 4. Wowing them by throwing in a small gift card to Starbucks or similar. 5. Including a name and number if they have any questions. Always keep this up to date with fresh information. The wording on the top will stay the same, but the information on the bottom will change depending on what your church is offering at that time. Bible study time. Home Bible studies are a major player in church growth. As you know, if a person doesn't learn about Jesus, they won't serve Him very long. As they grow deeper in their knowledge about Him, they also grow in their commitment to Him. Home Bible studies are a great way to accomplish this. You should get them started quickly while their interest is high. If your church is weak in the area of home Bible studies, and this step intimidates you, that's completely understandable. There are actually a lot of churches and pastors who never teach home Bible studies. If you are one of those pastors, I don't intend to offend you, but we need to change this trend. Home Bible studies are the perfect opportunity to connect and teach. You're able to connect with the student and show them the foundational truths of the Word of God, which will help them get started stronger in their relationship with God. There is no way I could cover it in this book, but if you are intimidated about home Bible studies, don't be. Remember, when you use home Bible studies as a soul-winning tool, it's more about connecting and discussing than you being a scholar. There are some Bible studies that are one lesson and some others that are several months long. The best approach for soul winning and retaining new guests is to use a Bible study that helps you to connect with them. Go in with the purpose of connecting and discussing. Page 81. Scheduling the Bible study. Scheduling the Bible study is not as scary as most people think it is. In fact, if you know the right approach, it's pretty easy. If you will practice the approach I'm about to show you, you will gain confidence and schedule more Bible studies than you ever thought possible. On the Monday after their second visit, call them and say this: "Hey James, this is Brian Davis from the church. It was good to see you again at church. We're so glad that you came. I have a quick question. Do you ever have a desire to know more about the Bible?" He will probably say yes. You say, "Great, here's what we'll do. We'll get together Thursday night for a 30-minute Bible study. Would 6 or 7 work better for you?" He will give you a time, and boom, the Bible study is scheduled. If he says that he can't do it Thursday night, you should be ready to give him 2 other options and ask him which one would work better for him. Something like this: "No problem, I can do Friday or Saturday. Which of those work best for you?" Page 82. He just told you that he wants to know more about the Bible, so your job is to negotiate the schedule and make it happen. If possible, it's best to have the same person who made the first time call to them also make this call to them. It's not necessary, but it's more effective and successful when they are able to hear a voice they've heard before. This is another script that my friend Matt Maddox has perfected over the years. It's one of the most successful approaches ever used. Scheduling this Bible study is a big step in the life of a guest. They've probably never done anything like this in their life, so they don't know what to expect, and they're going to be nervous. Make sure the Bible study teachers know what they're doing, and make sure they stick to the 30 minutes they promise. Get in, connect, talk for a few minutes, then get into the lesson, and always make sure you stay on time. You would rather leave them wanting more than wishing you were gone. Before you leave, make sure you schedule the next Bible study with them for next week. Keep doing this, and you will develop a great connection, and they will grow closer to God. Invited and involved. Remember, the goal with the second-time guests is about getting them connected and involved. You should always have a connection event coming up soon. Whenever the next connection event is getting close, print off a list of all the second-time guests from the past 3 months and get them involved. If you aren't sure, go back to the chapter dealing with long-term connections and review the ideas I listed. If you get them involved, they'll start to feel like part of the team and taking ownership. Page 83. Recap for second-time guest. Get connected note on Monday, including small gift card to Starbucks or similar. The Bible study phone call. Invited and involved in upcoming connection event. More aggressive? Early in this chapter, I said that I was going to tell you what some more aggressive churches are doing. I only recommend this if you have strong Bible study teams. Here's what they're doing. They are actually scheduling the Bible study on the first visit. That's right. During the Monday night visit to a first-time guest, instead of asking the 2 questions, they add the Bible study question to the end. So it goes like this. Schedule the visit, deliver the gift, compliment something. How did you hear about our church? If there were one thing we could pray for you about, what would it be? Do you ever have a desire to know more about the Bible? If your Bible study teachers and teams are strong and ready for more students, this is a great way to push forward. Page 84. Regular attenders. Just because they have committed to your church doesn't mean they don't need attention also. One of the reasons the back door gets so much attention is because our regular attenders get no attention. Think about how valuable this group is. Their attendance, their participation, their giving, their praying, their help. Sure, there are some of them who have problems, and maybe you would like to choke them sometimes. But this is your big core, and you need to make sure they feel valued and connected. Here are 5 things you need to have on your schedule to follow up with your regular attenders. 1. Keep them informed and invited. 2. Make sure they are in a connect group. 3. Regular encouragement. 4. Remember their birthday. 5. Tap into their unique gifts and talents. Keep them informed and invited. Don't let them feel undervalued or out of the loop. Make sure they know about all the events coming up and take every opportunity to get them more and more involved. When they get involved and connected with newcomers, great connections are created. Page 85. Connect groups. I realize that you may not have connect groups in your church yet, and like I said before, I want you to do everything in this book before you start connect groups. But once you have established connect groups, make sure all of your regular attenders are involved in the one that fits them best. Regular encouragement every 3 months. If people go very long without a boost of encouragement, they begin to feel insignificant. Even if they aren't extremely involved or productive, they are still a part of the church family. Keeping them encouraged is one of the most effective ways to keep them in the church. There are lots of ways to do this, and you can be very creative in communicating with them. Here are a few ideas. Quick note in the mail, text message, email, call them, go by and visit them. One of my close friends pastors a very strong church, and one of the things he is committed to is writing 3 notes each day to regular attenders in his church. He has the directory with everybody's name on it and a small pad of paper on his desk. He picks 3 people, thinks about their unique attributes and how they have blessed the church, and he writes them a quick personal note of encouragement and appreciation. It takes him less than 15 minutes to write them, stamp them, and stick them into the mailbox. He checks those 3 names off the directory and keeps doing the same thing every day until he has covered everybody. He claims this has been one of the key practices to staying connected with the regular attenders in his church. Maybe that will work for you. Feel free to steal the ideal and use it. Whatever you choose, make sure the regular attenders in your church are encouraged regularly. Page 86. Happy birthday to you. A funny story. We were sitting around and talking with several of our friends one night, and the question came up, what's your favorite holiday? When it came around to my wife, she said, my birthday. There's one special day every year that belongs to them. It's their birthday, and you shouldn't forget it. Take the time to handwrite a birthday card to each of your regular attenders, and it will mean more to them than you can imagine. Their gifts and talents. Would you want to stay where your gifts and talents weren't recognized and appreciated? One of the biggest complaints people have with their church is that they don't feel like they're being used. Ironically, another major complaint is that they're being used too much. Make sure your regular attenders have the chance to get involved in the areas where they fit best, but that they aren't worked like a rented mule. If they enjoy what they are doing and they aren't overworked, they will stay much happier and much longer. Page 87. Recap for regular attenders. Keep them informed of and invited to get involved in upcoming events. Connect groups. Regular encouragement every 3 months. Birthday card. Make sure they are able to use their gifts and talents. Slippers. You've probably never heard this term, and if you want to use a different title, it's fine with me. But a slipper is a person who has been a regular attender but is showing signs of slipping away. They're missing services and showing signs that something is hindering their commitment to God. If we don't pursue them, they can quickly begin to feel like the church doesn't care. Some pastors take the attitude that the person just needs to straighten up and they aren't going to try to chase them down. But if a person is struggling and their mind and spirit are weak, it can be almost impossible to encourage themselves. They need somebody to be there for them, even when they are struggling and possibly failing. Here's a simple plan to follow up with slippers. After missing 2 consecutive weeks. After a person misses 2 consecutive weekends, somebody on your Monday night follow-up teams, I'll cover more on this later, needs to call them, and they need to hear those 4 things. 1. We've been missing you, and we're concerned. 2. Just wanted to make sure everything is okay. 3. Ask if there is anything you can do for them. 4. End call with, hope to see you again Sunday. Page 88. Every 2 weeks. You have to strike a balance of staying connected and being too pushy. The goal is to let them know that you are there for them and they are welcome at the church even though they have missed some services. If they continue to miss services, repeat the call above every 2 weeks for a period of 2 months. Card. Every 2 months. After they have missed 2 consecutive months, they will be classified as inactive. To stay in contact with them, send a card every 2 months that says, "We haven't seen you in a while, but we hope to see you soon. In fact, we would love to see you soon." On a certain day every 2 months, simply print a report of all the inactives and send a card to every one of them. This lets them know that your church is still open for them. Recap for slippers. Call after missing 2 consecutive weeks. Call every 2 weeks they are absent. After missing 2 months, send a card every 2 months. Page 89. Staff and volunteers. One of the worst feelings in the world is to feel underappreciated. You've probably been there before. You are working hard, but it feels like nobody notices. If you want your staff and volunteers to feel like a part of the team, to feel like it's worth all their hard work, and to feel like you actually care about them, you need to have a systematic plan in place. Random words. This is a no-brainer, right? Obviously, it's good to throw in a word of appreciation whenever you can as you meet people walking down the halls. Believe it or not, a large percentage of church volunteers and staff members say that they rarely receive any praise for what they do. They receive instruction and they receive an ugly look of disgust when things don't go right, but they rarely receive words of appreciation or praise. Make sure that you and the other members on your staff are mindful of the fact that everybody needs to feel appreciated for their efforts. It's as simple as training your mind to think about the things a person does when you see them coming down the hall toward you. If you will train your brain, you can quickly identify that person's strong point and contributions, and a quick word of appreciation does the rest. For example, when you see John walking toward you, think about what he has been involved in and say, "Hey John, listen, I wanted to tell you that we really appreciated you helping set up the sound equipment for the block party last week. It was a big help." Page 90. The key is to train your mind to think about these questions when you see anybody coming your way. What have they been involved in? Where have they been helping? Is there something new they are getting involved with? Think about those things and you will be able to offer random words of encouragement that will have a huge impact. Let's celebrate. Random words of appreciation are a great start, but you also need to have a systematic plan to make sure everybody is recognized. One of the best ways to make this happen is to have a staff banquet and a volunteer dinner every 6 months. You can offset the dates so that one of them falls every 3 months. For example, January, staff banquet; April, volunteer dinner; July, staff banquet; October, volunteer dinner. Staff banquet. If you are the pastor, at the staff banquet, make sure you spend one-on-one time with every single staff member at the dinner, sincerely thanking them for all they do. You also want to recognize each person by name and talk about what they contribute and how valuable their role is to the success of the church. Page 91. Volunteer dinner. At the the volunteer dinner, make sure to invite everybody who has volunteered for anything over the past 6 months. After the meal, give a speech letting them know how valuable they are. Either call each of them by name and mention their contributions, or ask each person to stand and tell what area they have been involved in. Then put on some music, serve some dessert, and make sure you and your staff get around the room and spend time sincerely thanking them face to face for volunteering. You can do these meals buffet style or have them catered. One church that I work with has their staff serve the volunteers at the volunteer dinner, and the volunteers serve the staff at the staff banquet. Mix it up and be creative with this. You may even want to give an award once in a while. Just make sure you make your staff and volunteers know without a shadow of a doubt that they are making a difference and that their hard work is being noticed and appreciated. People who feel appreciated are the most dynamic and loyal staff members and volunteers on the planet. Recap for staff and volunteers. Train your brain to take every opportunity to give random words of encouragement. Staff banquets and volunteer dinners every 6 months. That's it. There it is. If you don't currently have a system at all, you're probably about to choke because it seems like a lot. Believe me, you can do this. You can make this happen. I want you to shoot for the entire plan, but the truth is that even if you only had a few of these actions, it will make an impact on your church. I tell people all the time, do what you can with excellence and keep pushing forward. Most of you can do this entire plan if you are willing to put in the effort. As your church grows, you may want to add something, or you may want to tweak this plan a little. I'm not saying that this is the only plan that works, but I am saying that this is a plan that works. I've already said it, but let me say it again. Don't fall for that old trick that makes you think you have to come up with a brand new unique plan on your own. That's garbage. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using a plan that has been successful time after time. The key for you as a leader is to know where you're going and to have a plan to get there. Remember the clear path we outlined in the 2nd chapter? Get extremely familiar with the step-by-step follow-up plan I just laid out for you. Go forward. Pages 92 and 93. Coordinator. But I've already told you that I'm not organized or systematic. How am I going to keep up with all of this? Earlier in this chapter, I told you that I will give you a tip to help you stay organized and systematic. There's a person every single church needs, and by adding this one person, they will drive their retention rate up immediately. You need to have a follow-up coordinator. We have choir directors, worship leaders, and on, but we just hope follow-up happens. But when you take a person who is committed to your church and train them in this role, you will see something very powerful happen. There's a church in Texas who, when they were starting up, there were only 2 staff members, the pastor and a follow-up coordinator. They did outreach together, but then the follow-up coordinator would spend several hours every week making sure their follow-up system was as effective as it could possibly be. Maybe you don't have a person that you are ready to throw in this role right now, but maybe there is a person in your church who has good organizational skills and you can start training. Maybe you're not a pastor, but you have good organizational skills and you could be that person. If you feel that, take this book to your pastor and ask him to read it and tell him that you want to get involved. If you are a pastor, you don't have time to manage all the follow-up tasks in your church, and they will begin to slip past. And that's when the devil comes in and starts to tell you that you're not doing a good job and that you're a failure. You need a person that you can depend on to take ownership of your follow-up program. As with any position, be sure you make it clear what you are expecting them to do and get them to agree to it before you officially appoint them. Let them know that this is a very important position. You need somebody who A. understands clearly what is going to be expected of them. B. is committed to and diligent in their work ethic. C. has proven their loyalty to you and your church. Take action quickly to prayerfully find a person that you can appoint as your follow-up coordinator and set up a meeting with them immediately to start the conversation. Page 94. Executing the plan. How can we get all this done? There are several parts to this follow-up plan, and it can be confusing if you don't have a good strategy for implementing it. In the chart below, I've written it all out so you can understand it as simply as possible. Realize this: some of the things in this plan will need to be handled by an individual, and some other things will be handled by teams. Your follow-up teams will rotate every Monday night and take care of a lot of the follow-up tasks. Why Monday night? Remember, you have a much greater chance of retaining guests when you follow up within 36 hours. On page 94, please view the example. Page 95. Monday nights. As you can see in this chart, the Monday night teams take care of a lot. Get everybody possibly involved on one of these teams. They rotate every week. They will handle a lot of the work, and they will love it. Here's a rundown of the following plans for any given Monday night. Making gift baskets. Calling and visiting first-time guests. Sending Get Connect notes to second-time guests. Scheduling Bible studies with second-time guests or with first-time guests if your church is more aggressive in this area. Sending birthday cards unless this is handled by an individual. Calling slippers after they have missed 2 weeks and every 2 weeks they miss. Sending cards to inactives every 2 months. Some churches include things other than follow-up in these Monday night meetings, such as compassion ministries or outreach efforts, and that's fine. But don't allow those other things to become the primary focus. It's vital to do follow-up on Monday nights. With organized and unified teams, these things can be handled efficiently and more quickly every Monday night. The coordinator. The person whom you choose to be your follow-up coordinator will play a major role in whether your follow-up system is a success or a failure. They must be diligent, consistent, trained, and loyal. They also must know exactly what is expected of them. According to several pastors, one of the most helpful things I have developed is this simple checklist for follow-up coordinators. Page 96. Follow-up coordinator checkpoints. On page 96, please view the follow-up coordinator checkpoint list. Page 97. Closing thoughts. For some reason, we only think about first-time guests when we hear the word follow-up, but there are a lot of other people who also deserve our attention. The main groups that you need to regularly follow up with are first-time guests, second-time guests, regular attenders, slippers, staff, and volunteers. You need to be systematic and organized so it doesn't become a frustrating mess. To make sure this is done as effectively as possible, think and pray about who would be the best person to be the follow-up coordinator at your church. Share your vision with them. Let them read this book. Pour yourself into them and let them help you. Follow-up is a giant component of any strong church. Without an effective follow-up plan, you'll struggle year after year, but with an effective plan, you can thrive year after year. Chapter 6, page 98. Things that help and things that hurt. When it comes to church growth and trying to develop a healthy church that is pleasing to God, there's more to it than just having the right programs. If you don't have the right motives, foundations, and connection with God, it will never be pleasing to Him. Page 99. The things that are taught in this book are practical and proven steps which will help you keep more, not all, but more of the people who try your church. But beyond these steps, there are some things that can accelerate your results, and there are also some things that can stop your results, like hitting a brick wall. I don't want to sound like I'm demoting my own book, but the truth is that this book alone isn't an automatic ticket to victory lane in the arena of retention. If you study the steps in this book and do every single one of them, you're still not guaranteed to see great results. Pretty encouraging, right? The good news is that I have identified the things that can help you reach your retention goals, and I've also identified some things that can absolutely kill your retention goals. I could list more than these, and I'm sure you can come up with a few also, but these are at the top of the list. If you do the things that help and make sure you're not doing the things that hurt, you will be much more likely to succeed with retention. Warning: don't take this chapter lightly. The last thing you want to do is spend a lot of time and effort developing these steps only to be blindsided by something that you thought was insignificant. The things I've identified as helpful can catapult you forward faster than you've ever imagined, and the things I've identified as hurtful can turn your efforts into a nasty train wreck. I also want to make it clear that my goal here is to help you, not offend you. As you read this chapter, if you realize that your church needs to make some improvements, please don't be offended. I'm simply trying to make it as clear as possible for you to identify the things that could be holding you back. Focus on these simple but powerful benchmarks, and you'll make more progress for the kingdom of God and dodge some potentially major setbacks. Page 100. Things that help. In your quest to keep more people, there are 4 things that I have identified that are common to churches that have high retention rates. These things can bring breakthrough momentum into your church. Prayer. The most important component to accelerate in any area is prayer. I know it's almost become cliche to say it, but it still holds true that if you aren't connected to God through prayer, you're doing it on your own. The Bible makes an extremely strong statement when it says, "Except the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain that build it." This doesn't mean that God Himself will come down in physical form and do it all. But it does mean that He has to be in charge. And if we take off on our own path, we would probably end up failing. God wants to guide us, direct us, and help us. His desire is that we would talk with Him every single day. Tell Him what's on our mind and listen to Him. He generally wants to guide us through His Spirit. It's not His will that we just run wild through life and call on Him when a crisis come up. He wants us to be connected to Him every day, not just used as a spare tire when something breaks down. Staying committed to a daily habit of prayer where you talk to God and allow Him to speak to you will empower you to do much more than if you tried to run on your own wisdom and strength. Building a system for retention is a big deal, not only to you, but also to God. He wants your church to keep more people than you do. As you are developing this system in your church, make sure you and your prayer teams are praying that God will give you success in keeping more people. Page 101. Fasting. And the award for the hardest thing any Christian could do goes to Drum roll, please. Fasting. It actually is a hard thing to commit to, but it's extremely powerful. Fasting is something that isn't talked about as much as it has been in the earlier generations. Fasting requires a strong desire to be closer to God, and unfortunately, we don't see that as much as we should in today's Christians. Even though we don't hear about it as much, there is no way to deny its power and importance. I did a study on the subject of fasting, and I was amazed at how many of the breakthrough stories in the Bible are tied to fasting. For example, the story of Esther and the way her entire nation was saved had a turning point from destruction to deliverance, and it all started when they fasted and prayed. Fasting doesn't actually change God, but it changes us. We get so caught up in the culture of the world that sometimes we lose our ability to connect with God at the level we need to. When we're not connected to God at a deep level, we tend to pray shallow prayers and have weaker faith. Fasting brings us to a place where we can connect with God at a much deeper level. Making that sacrifice and spending that extra time of consecration with Him makes a huge difference. I have personally experienced times where I really needed a breakthrough with something in my life, and I committed to fasting and praying, and God has blown my mind time after time. The time fasting and praying really got me to the place where I could communicate and connect with God. Page 102. The Bible tells us that some things come only through fasting and praying. What that tells me is that if a church doesn't have an element of fasting and praying in it, there are some things that church will never experience. Do you want to keep people so badly that you would fast for it? Unity and teamwork. Division can break any organization, but unity and teamwork can generate a force that is practically unstoppable. I've seen teams of very strong people become embarrassingly ineffective because they weren't working together. But I've also witnessed teams of people with little skill work together to accomplish more than I ever could imagine. Unity and teamwork is when every person in the group is doing their part unselfishly and helping the others do the same. Unity and teamwork is when the overall mission is more important than personal agenda. Unity and teamwork is when we are more important than me. Unity and teamwork is when the entire team is extremely mature, wise, and prayerful about how they handle things. Unity and teamwork is when the team isn't easily offended, frustrated, or aggravated. Creating a retention system can be a challenge, even with a practical plan like the one I'm giving you. You will still face some obstacles, and you will have to be able to effectively solve problems when they arise. If you have a group of people who know how to work well together and there is no division among them, your church will outperform expectations almost every time. Page 103. Strong leadership. One of my favorite statements of all time is, "Everything rises and falls on leadership." Growing a church is an intense job, and it takes a strong leader to make it happen. It doesn't take a perfect leader, but it does take a strong and growing leader. Strong leadership is the difference in failure and success. When we're talking about a church, the pastor and the core staff are the ones who have the steering wheel. Wherever they steer, that's where the ship will go. Think about the importance of the decisions that pastors and church leaders have to make. The eternity of entire cities is depending on them to make wise and aggressive decisions. If a church doesn't have strong leadership, it will never reach and keep the people of that city. If you struggle building and leading a team, motivating your staff, building your outreach efforts, or any other necessary part of your church, recognize it and do something about it. Every leader in the world can become a better leader. 3 quick keys for strong leadership. Stay humble. Stay close to God. Never stop learning both biblical principles and practical leadership methods. Things that hurt. Over the years, there have been a few times, maybe more, that I have worked with a church personally, gave them a complete plan of action, and I know they did most of it, but their retention rate still stunk. And when I say it stunk, I mean it was terrible. I thought to myself, what is going on here? Why aren't things getting better for them? So I started doing a focus evaluation of all the churches I was personally associated with because I had to find out what was going on. Some of them were doing absolutely amazing. Their retention rate of first-time guests was at 35%, and second-time guests as high as 75%. And some of these had a slipper rate of less than 3%. The majority of them weren't hitting those super high marks, but they were still doing very good. The average retention rates for these churches were about 25% of first-time guests, 45% for second-time guests, and their slipper rate was in the 6-8% range. That's good, and you can definitely hit those marks. But there were a few churches that were not growing at all. They weren't keeping any more than before, and it was killing me. My plan wasn't fixing them. It was driving me nuts. The frustration drove me to discover some things that were keeping them stuck. I drilled down deep and identified these things, and I'm about to share them with you, which are what I like to call the characteristics that kill retention. When you read the next few sections, please be brutally honest with yourself. And if you see any of these things in your church, please, I'm personally begging you, take action quickly. These things are like poison, and your church will never maintain growth if poison is in the recipe. Page 104. Ineffective or non-existent outreach evangelism system. I spend a lot of time talking about the different systems a church needs to have in place and the essential components of a healthy and effective church. One of those key components is the outreach evangelism system. This is the component that feeds the church with new people, and if new people aren't coming into the church, there's no possible way to grow. The two systems of outreach and retention are interdependent and rely on each other heavily. If we are weak with outreach, the retention system will be limited. And if we are weak with retention, the outreach system will be extremely frustrated. They need each other. In order for your retention system to be in a good flow and to be working well, you need more than just a couple of visitors every once in a while. The people working in the retention system will get bored with it. They'll never get in a consistent flow, and they'll feel insignificant. Your outreach efforts provide life to your retention efforts. There is something special that happens in the atmosphere of the church when these two things are working together. Momentum builds, and people begin to genuinely expect good things to happen. They're seeing people come in, and a lot of them are staying, and it builds a progressive atmosphere that causes people to buy into the overall mission of the church more than ever. If your church has an ineffective and non-existent outreach system, make a plan, ask for help, and do whatever it takes to get a steady stream of new people flowing into your church. Page 105. Worship service stinks. There's no easy way to say this. So let me just come right out and say it. If your worship service stinks, you will struggle to keep people. I know the rule of the first 10 minutes, but if your worship service is bad enough, it can leave such a terrible taste in a guest's mouth that the strongest Listerine on the market won't wash it out. Some of the worship services I have attended have been so poorly planned out, so carelessly executed, and outright drab, I would seriously question the mental stability of a guest if they ever did come back. One of the most disappointing things is to go into a worship service where there is no passion and no excitement. No matter where you go to church, if they truly believe Jesus did what the Bible says he did, they ought to be passionate in their worship service, and there ought to be some excitement in the atmosphere. Lots of dead airtime, awkward moments, and an overall lack of preparation and passion will cause your worship service to stink. And if it stinks bad enough, nobody will want to call it their home church. Page 106. Dead end filling. Mission and strategy are two of the most important factors to the overall success of any organization. Some churches have settled into a comfortable place and simply have no drive toward the future. The atmosphere is dead with no excitement, no drive, no energy, no vision, and no enthusiasm. People today demand more than that, and rightfully so. If they're going to commit their family to it, and if they're going to support it, it has to have the hope of a bright future. Churches that are moving forward have a different feel, and guests and members alike are affected by it. They are clear about where they are going, and they take every opportunity to communicate it publicly in a clear, positive, and motivating way. People hear it, feel it, and are moved by it because they want to be a part of something that is going to be successful and enjoyable. If people are talking more about where they've been than where they're going, it's a good sign that we need to make the hope of the future clearer for them. Get clear and cast vision. Page 107. We can't forget the power of the atmosphere. And the atmosphere of a church is created straight from the heart, hopes, and attitudes of the people. If the people are full of hope, the atmosphere will be full of hope. If the people are happy, the atmosphere will be happy and enjoyable. If the people are excited about the future and the goals of the church, it will be clear in the atmosphere. The atmosphere is so important that if a person decides to visit your church, but walks in and feels anything less than an excited and hope-filled group of people, there is a good chance they will feel like this is a dead-end organization, and it will be very difficult for them to ever overcome that. Yes, ever. Soapbox preaching. Many of the churches that had extremely low retention rates had this in common. Their preaching wasn't very practical and didn't contain very much applicable content. When people come to your church, especially when they reach the level of a second-time guest, they are searching for something in life. They're looking for answers and hoping to find some solutions for the real problems and issues they face daily. They need biblical preaching and teaching, and they need to know how to practically apply the Word of God to their lives. Unfortunately, in some churches, they hear more opinions than anything else. This is usually created from years of preaching to the same group of already saved people and knowing what they want to hear. But when guests start coming in, we have to reconsider our approach. Opinions are okay, but usually best kept to ourselves. Everybody has an opinion, but if I have the microphone and scream mine out loud, I set myself in direct opposition to everybody who may feel differently about it. If I have a lot of guests, that's a lot of opinions and a lot of opportunities for people to feel offended, all because I had to give my opinion. So that I'm not misunderstood, and I'm sure I will be anyway, let me say it clearly. There are some things we need to be clear about from the pulpit. There are some things developing in the world that churches need to strongly stand against. That's what God would want us to do, but He wouldn't want us to put all of our soapbox topics in that category and lean on them every time we get behind the podium. Okay, I know some of you are screaming at me right now, and you're getting ready to send me a hateful email. I promise, I don't mean any harm, but I do want to be honest about this. The people who come to your church are in need of help, and the practical answers from the Bible can help them. Just make sure your church doesn't allow personal agendas and soapbox bullies to populate its platform. Today's culture is not interested in preaching that is low on content and high on opinion, and church leaders need to seriously consider the fact that this is the culture you have been commissioned to win. Page 108. Lack of spiritual growth. Maybe the most deadly killer of them all is the lack of spiritual growth. When people come to your church, they don't need to stay the same. We can't force people to change. But when they start coming to your church, they are communicating the idea that they want to change. If they wanted to stay the same, they would have kept going to the river and playing golf on Sundays. Once they start to show the first signs of commitment, it's our job to help them along the path of spiritual growth. If we can't help them change for the better, they won't stay. And why should they? There are 3 things that we need to pay careful attention to, because if these things are missing, long-term retention will be impossible. 1. A plan for spiritual growth. 2. Make the next step clear. 3. Call to action. First, we must have a plan for spiritual growth for the people who come to our church. Bible studies, classes, involvement in outreach and service, and personal teaching and mentoring are all great ways they can experience spiritual growth. But we need to have a plan for them from the time they start and progressing through the stages of their life. Second, we must make it clear to them what their next step should be. It becomes extremely confusing and awkward when a person is trying something new and they aren't sure what to do next. It's our job to paint a clear picture for them, be creative and think outside the box, to develop ways to make sure each person knows what step they should take next in their quest for spiritual growth. Third, we must have a call to action. I'm not talking about a heavy pressure, but a clear call for them to take action. People want to commit and people need to commit. But most people don't have the confidence or personality type to step out and ask for it. If you will make a clear call to action, you will be surprised at how many people will step out and do it. A call to repent, to get baptized, to get involved in an upcoming Bible study or connect group, or to join a class. We can't just wait and expect people to push their way in. We have to make a clear call to action, and when we do, we'll see more people growing spiritually, which will automatically drive our retention rate up. Pages 109 and 110. Closing thoughts. Like I said in the beginning of this chapter, please don't take this section lightly. You could master the entire book and still not see any growth in your church if you don't pay attention to these things that help and hurt. Take some time to think about each one of these points and think about how your church is doing with each of them. One pastor had a great idea where he passed out sheets to the entire church and asked them to give a grade for each of these points. That may sound risky to you, but he was able to get good cross-section of feedback by doing that. Whatever you do, don't let these things stop your church. Getting extremely honest about these things in this chapter may be the biggest help of anything in this book. Challenge yourself. Are we doing the things that help? Are we guilty of doing things that hurt? Which one of these do we need to work on the most? Take whatever steps you need to so that these things don't stop your progress and potential. Page 111. Get your free video now. www.retention101.net/jumpstart. Chapter 7. Page 112. Evaluating. Your car deserves it, doesn't your church? We take our cars into a shop somewhere every few months, and they change the oil and do a 12-point or 15-point inspection. Or we're supposed to anyway. When they do that, if everything checks out good, we drive on with no problems. Page 113. If they find something wrong, like a dirty air filter, washer fluid is low, or a leak around a gasket, they will tell you about it, and you have the option to fix it or just let it go. Most people choose to tell the guy to fix it, and in about 5 to 10 more minutes, they're on their way. But that doesn't mean that your car will be in great shape forever. It takes more than one tune-up to keep a car running smoothly. You have to get on a schedule and take that car to the shop every few months just to make sure that nothing is wrong and that everything is running as efficiently as possible. Now, with that in mind, let's shift our focus and think about our church. How often does our church get a routine checkup to make sure things are still running smoothly? Having a meeting and deciding how we're going to handle certain things is a great idea. But are we really so naive to think that things will just continue to operate smoothly over a long period of time? Evaluation is the key to excellence. If you make a plan and implement a plan but never evaluate things, chances are that you won't see the type of success you are hoping for. Evaluation determines so much of your future. If you never take the time to compare your original plans with your current progress, how will you know that you're heading in the right direction? A church is a lot like a sailboat. You can get on the water and get it pointed in the right direction, but you have to constantly make sure you're still headed in the right direction and adjust the sails accordingly. If you neglect the evaluation, you will not neglect the frustration, and you quite possibly may not neglect your elimination. Evaluation is the key to continuing in the right direction. Page 114. When we take time to evaluate, we get the chance to notice the things that are working like we hope, the things that aren't working like we hope, and we get to learn about things that can be improved. If you're involved in the sales or business world very much at all, you may have been challenged to think about these 3 questions. What do we need to keep doing? What do we need to stop doing? What do we need to start doing? The reason those questions are so powerful is because they force you to think about where you are now compared to where you want to be. Paying attention pays off. My youngest son, Adam, is an extremely good golfer. When he was about 2 or 3, he was swinging one of those plastic golf clubs in the yard, and Lisa and I noticed that his swing was abnormally good. As the years went by, he has always had a strong passion for the game of golf, so I would take him to the course and let him hit some balls and ride around in the golf cart. His passion continues to grow stronger every year, and his ability to play is continually getting stronger also. Adam is always hitting golf balls around our yard, and he has so much fun trying to hit shots over the trampoline or close to a tree. And I love to watch him practice because I can see that he is really paying attention to what he is doing. It's not good enough for him to just walk up and whack the ball. But because he wants the shot to be as good as possible, he pays close attention to what he is doing with his hands, his stance, his head, and all the different parts of his swing. He notices how these little details impact the end result, and he knows that if he pays close attention to the details, the ball will fly so much more accurately. I remember one day he came to me and wanted to show me his new putting technique. He had been working on it. He wanted to show me that he had changed the way he was holding the club, and he changed something about his stance. He said, "Dad, my new putting stance is awesome because earlier today I saved 3 long putts in a row. Watch this." The thing I love was that he was paying attention to the details. He noticed that if he changed a couple of things slightly, it could impact the outcome greatly. This is not just a golf principle, but the same holds true for your church. It's so easy to get busy with all the work and forget about paying attention to the details. Taking time to evaluate the details will keep us sharp and give us the results we want. Maybe we're doing everything fine, and maybe there is something we need to change. Evaluation tells the story. Page 115. Progress Meetings. It would be a terrible idea to drive your car 2 years without getting a checkup. It would also be a terrible idea to try to operate your church for a long period of time without doing routine checkups to make sure things are running the way they should. One of the things I teach pastors to do is to have regular progress meetings where they meet with the different teams and leaders in the church and go over the details of what they are doing. You don't want to be a micromanager where you critique every tiny particle, but you do want to make sure that team is hitting the mark they set out to hit. It's so easy for things to drift away from the original purpose and goals. My challenge for pastors is to be involved enough to make sure the major components of their church are heading in the right direction. Set the meeting. Talk about the original purpose and goals. Talk about what they've been doing. Tweak things if they need to be tweaked, and encourage them for their good work. It's a great way to make sure you don't end up a year down the road wondering what went wrong. By setting consistent progress meetings, leadership stays unified and the mission remains the target. This book is about the retention component of your church, and I can tell you firsthand that if you don't set consistent times to sit down with the key players and evaluate the details, it will probably fall apart quicker than you ever imagined possible. Encouraging, huh? But when you mark evaluation at top priority on your calendar, you drive the chances of success through the roof, and it becomes much harder to fail. Retention is a system with a lot of moving parts, and you won't get it all right the first week. It's up to you not to give up, but instead to take the time to think it through, evaluate it, and make the change needed so you can succeed at keeping as many people as possible. Page 116. Productive and impacting. The impact of evaluation is sometimes overlooked because we are all so anxious to get something new started. There's nothing wrong with starting new things, and sometimes we need to, but we have to be extremely careful that the new things don't steal our desire to evaluate and stay in tune with the things we already have going. I truly believe that sitting down with a team of people from your church and evaluating your progress is some of the most productive and impacting time you can spend. It's an investment of your time that will always pay off big. You will also build stronger leadership and better teams because it's proven that team building happens best when the team is solving problems together. When you and your team sit around and really evaluate where you are with attendance tracking or follow-up, that's not wasted time. Not only are you finding the gaps, identifying the wins, and noticing what has been working and what hasn't been working, but you are also building a stronger team than you ever had. Page 117. Closing thoughts. Retention 101 is a book with a lot of step-by-step information. Hopefully you will start implementing the things you have learned, but you can't just start it and forget it. You have to periodically evaluate things to make sure they're still progressing in the right direction. Evaluation is so important that you can't ignore it. Schedule progress meetings on your calendar. Don't ignore them, and you will kill a lot of frustration and set yourself up for massive success. Chapter 8, page 118. What now? I am actually very proud that you're reading this chapter, because that alone shows that you're in the top percentage of people. When it comes to personal development products, such as a book, audio series, or video set, most people never read past the first chapter or listen past the first disc. So congrats! Page 119. Action or satisfaction. There are two different responses that will come from the people who read this book. The first response will be the person who realized that they need to improve in the area of retention and they start doing something about it. The other response will be the person who says that they're doing fine in the area of retention and they choose to do nothing. Since you've read this entire book, you probably have the idea that your church needs to improve in the area of retention. The thing that will hold lots of people back is the fear of trying something new. It all makes sense to them, but it's also intimidating to try something that is different than the way they've always done it. I don't want you to be one of the ones paralyzed by fear. So many people will convince themselves to just be satisfied with the way things are. But you've got so much more potential than that. It won't happen overnight, and it will take some effort, strategizing, and planning, but it will be worth it. Remember, the power of retention is that people not only try your church, but actually end up in heaven. First step. You've probably heard all of those little catchy phrases like, the journey of 1,000 steps begins with the first one. But they really are true. If you never take the first step, you'll never take the second step, and you'll never accomplish very much. Since most churches struggle with retention, you probably won't be able to depend on your neighboring churches to be a good example for you. You'll have to decide to step out and make it happen for yourself. Not only do you need to take that critical first step, but you need to do it quickly. Everything has a tendency to lose its high level of importance and urgency if we leave it on the shelf too long. The people who are going to visit your church deserve a good shot at heaven. There's no reason to put this off. Take action quickly. Page 120. Consistency. With all of the hype about new ideas and new programs, sometimes churches have the tendency to move from one to the next, demanding instant results from each one. They'll give it a quick try, and if it doesn't produce quickly, they'll move on to the next one. Our email inboxes are bombarded with new concepts that look attractive every day, but a church leader has to be consistent. If you don't believe in this plan, don't even begin. But if you do believe in it, start it and be consistent. Stick to it. The area of retention isn't always full of glamour and shocking headlines, and hopefully that's not what you're searching for. Honestly, it's just not very exciting with things that need to be taken care of routinely week after week. But the fact still stands that a solid plan for retention is something that will set successful churches apart from unsuccessful churches, and growing churches apart from stagnant and declining churches. It's up to the church leaders to understand the importance of retention and decide to be consistent with their plan month after month. Teamwork. As I mentioned earlier, teamwork is one of the keys to propelling your church forward, especially when you're trying something new. In the next section, I'm going to give you the step-by-step checklist that you can use to make all this happen. But the very first thing you need to do is to get some of your best people together and start the conversation. They have no idea about the things you've read in this book, so you will have to catch them up. I actually encourage you to give them this book and ask them all to read it. Challenge. Here's my challenge to see if you're serious about this. Get your core team together this week, whether that's 2 people or 30 people, and start the retention conversation with them and tell them what you would like to see happen. Don't try to cover everything. Just get the conversation started and talk to them about the importance of retention. If you aren't the pastor, here's my challenge to see if you're serious about this. Schedule a sit-down meeting with your pastor this week and tell him that you want to do whatever you can to help the church keep more people, and ask him to please read this book. When you get your core team on board with your plans, you can implement the changes so much more easily. Plus, when you have your team involved, you will get so many great ideas on how to make things operate smoothly. Page 121, Action List. I'm sure you have been highlighting and making notes, but it's always helpful when you can see the entire plan in one view. So on the next page, I'm going to give you the entire game plan in the form of an action list to help you see it as clearly as possible. Your goal will be to check every item off this action list. Page 122, Retention Action List. Establish the clear path. Use the illustration in Chapter 2 to help everybody on your team understand the path a guest will take when they try your church, from first-time guests all the way to being a committed Christian. Creating connections. Teach your church how important it is for them to intentionally connect with unchurched people. Check your facility for excellence and ease of use, and make sure greeters, teachers, etc. are prepared to give a great immediate connection. Right people, right places, right times. Increase the intentional friendliness of your church. Schedule connection events and use serving opportunities to create opportunities where long-term connections can be developed. Attendance tracking. Choose the method you will use to gather attendance data. Select the software you will use to keep track of this data. Choose and train a small team that will handle this. Follow-up. Prayerfully select a follow-up coordinator and have them read this book. Share the burden with the entire church and find out how many people want to get involved. Divide these volunteers into groups who will rotate each Monday night for guest follow-up. Pastor, follow-up coordinator, and core volunteers need to work out the exact details of how they will execute the follow-up plan in this book, making sure to cover the plan for first-time guests, second-time guests, regular attenders, slippers, and staff and volunteers. Evaluation plan. Set dates on your calendar to meet with the key leaders and discuss progress and sticking points. Page 123. No reason to wait. I recently read an email from a pastor that I worked with about a year ago, and I still stay in contact with him. The email was filled with true heartfelt joy. I am so thankful for what has happened to our church. I never told anybody, but I had really lost hope that our church would ever grow under my leadership. I was trying, but wasn't doing very good. Since we've been using this system, things have been so much different for the better. I'm truly grateful, and now I'm excited about the future. That's the kind of testimony that makes it all worthwhile for me. I remember how timid and reserved he was when I first met him, and now I understand why. He had lost hope and didn't believe his church could grow, but now he is more certain and confident than ever. I don't know where your church stands right now, but if it has been struggling, there's no reason to wait. If it has been doing pretty good, but needs to improve in some areas, there's no reason to wait. If the local church really is that valuable, outreach and retention shouldn't be optional. We need the best tools, methods, and techniques, and we need to take action. Page 124. What now? The title of this chapter is What Now? And that's exactly the question you have to answer for yourself. What now? As Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. If you want things to be different, the difference has to start with you. Will you take the first step? Will you take immediate action? Will you get your team together this week? You've read the book. What now? Will you go to work and develop a strong plan for retention in your church? Or will you settle for less? Like I said, this is not the only plan that will work. But whether you choose to use the things in this book or something else, I have one giant hope. I hope you do something. I hope you see the need for retention in your church and do something about it. What now? I hope you will go for it.